The Northern Dominion knows one truth above all others. Duke Kael Viermont does not yield. Not to rebellion, not to sentiment, and certainly not to expectation. When the court whispers that his iron grip has finally begun to crack, when rivals circle like wolves sensing blood, Kael stands in the center of the storm with the same cold precision that has defined his rule for a decade. But something has shifted, a variable he did not account for. A woman who refuses to be controlled. What happens when the most powerful man in the North discovers that true strength is not the absence of choice, but the courage to make one that destroys everything he built? Stay until the end to witness a confrontation that will redefine power itself. Drop a comment with the city you are watching from, and let me know if you see the fracture coming before he does. The winter wind cuts through the northern valley like a blade through silk, merciless and precise. Kael Viermont stands on the eastern balcony of Blackthorn Keep, watching the snow settle over the forested expanse below. His posture is rigid, hands clasped behind his back, every line of his frame projecting control. The castle rises behind him, a fortress of gray stone and sharp angles, built not for comfort but for dominance. It is a monument to order, to the uncompromising will of the man who rules it. Kael is 34, though his demeanor belongs to someone far older. His face is angular, sharply defined, with dark eyes that reveal nothing. His hair, black and cropped short, frames features that might be handsome if they were not so cold. He wears authority like armor, every movement calculated, every word a deliberate choice. Those who serve him do so with efficiency born of fear. Those who challenge him learn quickly that mercy is not part of his vocabulary. He built this dominion on discipline. When he inherited the title at 22, the northern territories were fractured, bleeding resources into petty rivalries and ineffective leadership. Kael crushed the dissent within 2 years. He restructured trade agreements, fortified borders, and eliminated corruption with surgical precision. The nobility feared him. The common people respected the stability he provided, even if they did not love the man behind it. Fear and respect, Kael learned early, were far more reliable than affection. But control requires constant vigilance. Every decision must be weighed, every alliance scrutinized. Emotion clouds judgment. Attachment creates vulnerability. Kael learned this lesson at 16 when his younger sister Maris died in a riding accident while he was away negotiating a trade route. He blamed himself for the distraction, for allowing sentiment to pull his focus from duty. He vowed never to make that mistake again. Since then, his life has been a relentless exercise in self-discipline, a fortress built not just of stone, but of will. Yet standing here now, as the first snowfall of the season blankets the valley, Kael feels something he has not allowed himself to feel in years: unease. It is a small thing, barely perceptible, but it gnaws at the edges of his awareness. The court is restless. The alliance with House Draymore, brokered over the past year, hinges on a marriage arrangement that Kael has not yet finalized. Lord Draymore's daughter, Seraphine, is beautiful, educated, politically astute. On paper, she is the perfect match. The union would cement Kael's power, expand trade routes into the southern provinces, and silence the whispers that he is too isolated, too ruthless, too unwilling to play the games that keep noble families bound in webs of mutual obligation. Kael knows he should accept the arrangement. Logic demands it. Strategy requires it. Yet every time he considers issuing the formal betrothal, something in him resists. Not sentiment, he tells himself. Simply caution. Rushing into alliances creates openings for manipulation. He needs more time to assess, to ensure there are no hidden agendas buried within the Draymore family's sudden eagerness. Behind him, the heavy oak door to the balcony opens. Kael does not turn. He knows the footsteps. Torrin, my lord. The evening council is assembled. Torrin Ashford is Kael's steward, a man in his late 50s with silver threading through his dark hair and a face lined by decades of careful observation. He has served the Viermont family since Kael's father ruled, and he is one of the few people Kael trusts. Trust, in Kael's world, is a calculated risk, and Torrin has earned it through unwavering loyalty and an ability to anticipate needs before they are spoken. Kael turns from the balcony, his expression unreadable. Any pressing matters? Torrin hesitates, a flicker of something uncertain crossing his features. There is a visitor, my lord. She arrived an hour ago. Unannounced. Kael's gaze sharpens. Unannounced visitors are rare. The castle's security does not allow for casual intrusions. Who? A young woman. She carries a letter bearing the seal of House Voss. Kael's jaw tightens almost imperceptibly. House Voss. A minor noble family from the eastern borderlands, barely significant enough to warrant his attention. They have no strategic value, no resources worth leveraging. He has not thought of them in years. What does she want? Torin's expression remains neutral, but there is something cautious in his tone. She requests an audience. She claims her presence is a matter of survival. Kael's mind works through the implications. Survival suggests desperation. Desperation makes people unpredictable. He does not have time for theatrical pleas from insignificant families seeking favor. Yet something about the phrasing stops him from dismissing her outright. Bring her to the study. I will see her after the council. Torin nods and withdraws. Kael remains on the balcony for another moment, allowing the cold air to clear his thoughts. Then he turns and walks back into the castle, his footsteps echoing through the stone corridors. The evening council convenes in the war room, a circular chamber dominated by a massive oak table scarred with decades of use. Maps cover the walls, charting trade routes, territorial boundaries, and resource distribution. Kael takes his seat at the head of the table, and the assembled lords and advisors fall silent. There are 6 of them tonight. Lord Gareth Dane, the master of coin, a portly man with sharp eyes and sharper instincts for profit. Lady Isolda Crane, an older noblewoman who controls the western grain estates and wields influence through calculated generosity. Sir Edric Vane, the commander of Kael's personal guard, a scarred veteran whose loyalty is absolute. Lord Brennan Thale, a younger lord with ambitions that outpace his competence. Countess Mira Selwyn, a widow who inherited her late husband's mining operations and has proven herself more ruthless than any man at the table. And finally, Lord Victor Harrow, Kael's chief advisor, a man whose intelligence is matched only by his ambition. Victor leans forward, his fingers steepled. My lord, the Draymore alliance requires finalization. Lord Draymore grows impatient. He has made his expectations clear. A betrothal announcement within the month, or he will seek arrangements elsewhere. Kael's gaze does not waver. Let him seek elsewhere if he chooses. I do not respond to ultimatums. A ripple of tension moves through the room. Victor's expression remains calm, but there is a tightness around his eyes. My lord, with respect, this alliance is not merely personal. It is strategic. The southern trade routes. I am aware of the strategic value, Victor. I am also aware that desperation weakens negotiating positions. If Draymore is so eager, he will wait. Lord Gareth clears his throat. My lord, the Treasury benefits from stability. A prolonged negotiation creates uncertainty. Merchants hesitate. Investments stall. Then assure the merchants that stability does not hinge on a single marriage arrangement. Lady Isolda speaks, her voice measured. Duke Viramont, the court expects a decision. Tradition dictates. Tradition, Kael interrupts, his tone cold, is a tool, not a master. I will not be dictated to by expectation. The silence that follows is thick. Sir Edric watches Kael with unwavering focus, his loyalty evident even as the others exchange glances. Countess Mira taps her fingers lightly on the table, her expression unreadable. Lord Brennan shifts uncomfortably, clearly unsure whether to speak. Victor leans back, his gaze steady. Of course, my lord. We serve at your discretion. But may I suggest that clarity benefits all parties? A firm decision, one way or another, prevents the perception of hesitation. Kael's jaw tightens. The perception of hesitation. Victor is skilled at framing criticism as advice. There is no hesitation. There is strategy. You would do well to remember the difference. Victor inclines his head, conceding the point without backing down. Understood, my lord. The meeting continues, cycling through reports on harvest yields, border patrols, and minor disputes among lower nobility. Kael listens, responds with precision, issues directives that leave no room for interpretation. But beneath the surface, his mind is already elsewhere, turning over Victor's words. The perception of hesitation. It is a danger Kael cannot ignore. Power is as much about appearance as substance. If the court believes he is faltering, rivals will test him. When the council finally adjourns, Kael dismisses them with a curt nod. Victor, lingers, as Kael expected. A word, my lord? Kael gestures for him to continue, though his expression offers no warmth. Victor steps closer, lowering his voice. I do not question your judgment, Kael, but I must speak plainly. The court is watching. Your refusal to commit to the Draymore alliance is being interpreted as weakness by some. Lord Thale, for instance, has been whispering to others that you fear losing control. Kael's gaze turns glacial. Thale is a fool. His opinions are irrelevant. Perhaps. But fools can be useful to those with sharper minds. I only caution that perception, once seated, grows quickly. Kael studies Victor for a long moment. Then I will give them something else to focus on. Victor nods slowly, a faint smile touching his lips. As you say, my lord. He withdraws, leaving Kael alone in the war room. Kael stands, moving to the window. The snow has thickened, blanketing the courtyard below in white. He watches the guards patrol the walls, their movements disciplined and predictable. Order. Control. These are the pillars of his rule. Yet Victor's warning lingers. Kael turns and leaves the war room, heading toward his private study. It is time to deal with the unannounced visitor. The study is smaller than the war room, more personal. Shelves line the walls, filled with leather-bound volumes on law, history, military strategy. A fire burns low in the hearth, casting flickering shadows across the room. Kael enters to find Torin standing near the door, and seated in the chair across from the desk is a young woman. She rises as he enters, and Kael takes her measure in an instant. She is young, perhaps 23 or 24, with dark auburn hair pulled back in a simple braid. Her clothing is travel-worn but well-made, practical rather than ornamental. Her posture is straight, her gaze direct. Most visitors avert their eyes in his presence, a subtle acknowledgement of his authority. She does not. Kael crosses to his desk, gesturing for her to sit. She does, though her movements are deliberate, as if she is choosing to comply rather than obeying out of deference. You are Elra Voss. Her voice is steady, unshaken by the coldness in his tone. I am. Kael sits, leaning back in his chair. Explain your presence. Elra meets his gaze without flinching. My family is dead. My father, my mother, my younger brother. Slaughtered 3 weeks ago by raiders who crossed the eastern border. I am the last of House Voss. Kael's expression does not change, but his mind sharpens. Raiders on the eastern border are not uncommon, but a coordinated attack on a noble house suggests something more organized. Why come here? Because your dominion shares that border. Because the raiders did not act alone. They were hired, paid to eliminate my family and seize our lands. By whom? Elra's jaw tightens. I do not have proof yet, but I know the patterns, the timing, the precision. Someone wanted my family removed, and they used the chaos of the borderlands to do it. Kael studies her, searching for signs of deception. He finds none. Her grief is real, buried beneath layers of controlled fury. And what do you want from me? Protection, resources, and justice. Kael's lips curve into something that is not quite a smile. Justice is expensive. What do you offer in return? Everything I have left. My loyalty, my knowledge of the Eastern families. My willingness to do whatever is necessary to see this through. Kael leans forward slightly, his gaze piercing. Loyalty is a word people use when they have nothing else to trade. Prove it is more than rhetoric. Elra does not hesitate. Give me a task. Test me. I am not here to beg, Duke Viremont. I am here to survive. And I will not survive by pretending to be helpless. The silence stretches between them, taut and charged. Kael recognizes something in her defiance, something uncomfortably familiar. She is not performing strength. She is wielding it. Finally, he speaks. You will stay in the castle. Torin will assign you quarters. You will have access to the records room. Begin your investigation. If you find evidence, bring it to me. If you prove useful, we will discuss terms. Elra nods once. Understood. She rises, and Kael expects her to leave. Instead, she pauses at the door, glancing back. One more thing. Kael waits. I have heard the stories about you, Duke Viremont. They say you are ruthless, that you trust no one, that you rule through fear. Her gaze is unwavering. I do not fear you. Kael's expression remains cold, but something flickers in his eyes. Perhaps you should. Elira's lips quirk into the faintest hint of a smile. Perhaps, but fear does not keep people alive. Strategy does. She leaves before he can respond. The door closes softly behind her and Kael is alone again. He stares at the space she occupied, his mind turning over her words. Fear does not keep people alive. Strategy does. It is an echo of his own philosophy, spoken by someone who should have no reason to understand it. Kael rises, moving to the window. Below, he can see Elra crossing the courtyard with Torin, her stride confident despite the foreign surroundings. For the first time in years, Kael feels something beyond calculation. It is not attraction, not sentiment. It is recognition. She is dangerous, not because she threatens him, but because she refuses to be controlled. And Kael does not know what to do with someone he cannot control. Over the following days, Elra becomes a fixture in the castle. She spends hours in the records room, poring over trade ledgers, correspondence, border patrol reports. Kael watches from a distance, assessing her methods. She is methodical, disciplined, relentless. She does not ask for help, does not seek favor. She simply works. The court notices. Whispers spread quickly. Who is she? Why is the Duke allowing a nobody from a dead house to access sensitive records? Lord Thele, ever eager to position himself, begins circulating rumors that Kael is distracted, that his judgment is compromised. Kael hears the whispers and ignores them. Let them speculate. Elira's presence is a test, not just of her, but of the court's loyalty. Those who question him openly reveal their ambitions. Those who remain silent demonstrate restraint. Information is power, and the court is providing him with plenty. One evening, a week after Elira's arrival, Kael finds her in the library. It is late, past midnight, and most of the castle has retired. She sits at a long table covered in documents, a single candle illuminating her focused expression. Kael approaches without announcing himself. She does not look up. You should rest. Exhaustion dulls the mind. Elira glances at him briefly before returning to the document in her hands. I will rest when I have answers. Kael pulls out a chair across from her, sitting without invitation. What have you found? She sets down the parchment, her expression grim. Your eastern border patrols have been reduced over the past 6 months. Subtly. A few men reassigned here, a route altered there. Nothing dramatic enough to raise immediate concern. But the cumulative effect is significant. There are gaps. Blind spots. Kael's jaw tightens. Who authorized the changes? The orders came through your steward's office, but Torin did not sign them. Someone forged his seal. Kael's mind races. Forgery suggests an inside operation. Someone with access to the administrative systems. Someone trusted enough to move unnoticed. Do you have suspects? Elra meets his gaze. 3. Lord Thale has been pushing for increased autonomy in border management. Countess Selwyn controls resources that could fund mercenaries. And Lord Harrow has the intelligence network to coordinate something this precise. Kael leans back, processing. All 3 have motive. All 3 have opportunity. But accusations without proof are useless. I know. That is why I need more time. Kael studies her. She is tired, dark circles shadowing her eyes, but her focus is unshaken. How long since you slept? Elra's expression hardens. That is not your concern. Kael's voice drops, cold and commanding. Everything within these walls is my concern. You are no good to me if you collapse from exhaustion. Elra stands abruptly, her hands flat on the table. I did not come here to be managed, Duke Viramont. I came here to survive. And survival does not pause for rest. Kael rises as well, his gaze locking with hers. Survival requires more than stubbornness. It requires clarity. And you will have neither if you continue like this. The tension between them crackles, neither willing to concede. Finally, Elra exhales, some of the rigidity leaving her shoulders. Fine. I will rest. But not because you ordered it, because it serves my purpose. Kael nods once, a faint trace of something almost like approval in his expression. Good. Elra gathers the documents, organizing them with swift efficiency. As she moves toward the door, she pauses. Why did you agree to help me? Kael considers the question. Because you did not beg, and because I despise inefficiency. If someone is operating within my territory, undermining my authority, I want them exposed. Elra turns to face him fully. And if I am wrong? If the raiders were simply opportunists? Then you will have wasted my time, and I will decide what that costs you. Elra holds his gaze for a long moment. Then she nods and leaves. Kael remains in the library, staring at the documents she left behind. He picks up one of the patrol reports. Scanning the altered routes, the forgery is skillful, nearly undetectable. Whoever orchestrated this has resources, patience, and access. Kael's thoughts turn to Victor. His chief advisor has always been ambitious, always positioning himself for greater influence. But would he risk direct betrayal? Victor is too intelligent to act without certainty of success, unless he believes Kael is vulnerable. The Draymore alliance, the whispers of hesitation, the court's restlessness, it all aligns. If Victor believes Kael's authority is weakening, he might see an opportunity to accelerate a shift in power. Kael sets down the report, his mind already calculating next steps. He needs proof, and he needs to ensure that Elra's investigation does not alert the conspirators before he is ready to move. But there is something else, something less tangible, gnawing at the edges of his awareness. Elra's presence has disrupted the carefully maintained equilibrium of his world. She does not defer, does not perform the expected rituals of subordination. She challenges him, not out of arrogance, but out of a fundamental refusal to be diminished. And Kael, who has spent years constructing walls of control, finds himself unsettled by her resistance. The following morning, Kael summons Victor to his study. The chief advisor arrives promptly, his expression calm and attentive. Victor, sit. Victor complies, settling into the chair with practiced ease. How may I serve, my lord? Kael does not waste time. I am concerned about the eastern border security. Recent reports suggest vulnerabilities. Victor's expression remains neutral. The eastern border has always been challenging. The terrain, the scattered settlements. We have managed it adequately. Adequately is not sufficient. I want a full audit of patrol routes and personnel assignments over the past year. Cross-reference any changes with resource allocations. Victor nods slowly. Of course. May I ask what prompted this concern? Kael's gaze is steady, revealing nothing. Call it due diligence. Victor studies him for a moment, then inclines his head. I will have the audit completed within 3 days. 2 days. Victor's smile is faint. As you wish, my lord. He rises to leave, but Kael stops him. One more thing. The woman from House Voss. What have you heard? Victor pauses, his expression thoughtful. The court is curious. Some see her presence as a distraction. Others wonder if you have a strategic interest in the Eastern families. And your assessment? Victor meets Kael's gaze. I think she is irrelevant, a survivor clinging to hope. But if her presence serves a purpose for you, then that is justification enough. Kael nods curtly, dismissed. Victor leaves, and Kael watches the door close behind him. Irrelevant. Victor's dismissal of Elra is either genuine or calculated. If genuine, it suggests he does not see her as a threat. If calculated, it means he is already aware of her investigation and positioning himself accordingly. Kael needs to accelerate the timeline. Pitbatum. That evening, Kael finds Elra in the training yard. It is an unusual location for a noblewoman, but Elra has never been conventional. She stands near the archery range, watching Sir Edric drill a group of younger guards. Her posture is attentive, analytical. Kael approaches, and she glances at him briefly before returning her focus to the training. Learning combat strategy? Elra's tone is dry. Observing competence, it is a rare enough quality. Kael almost smiles. Almost. You do not trust easily. I trust actions. Words are cheap. Kael watches the guards execute a formation shift, their movements precise under Edric's barked commands. You requested resources. I am providing them. Is that sufficient action? Elra turns to face him fully. You are providing access, not resources. There is a difference. Kael raises an eyebrow. Elaborate. Access means I am allowed to work within your constraints. Resources means you are actively supporting the investigation. So far, I have seen the former, not the latter. Kael considers her words. What would constitute active support? Elra's gaze is direct. Help me set a trap. If we suspect someone inside the castle, we need to force their hand. Create a scenario where they reveal themselves. Kael's mind engages immediately. What do you propose? Elra steps closer, lowering her voice. Leak false information. Suggest that I have found definitive proof and will present it to you tomorrow evening. If there is a conspirator, they will act, either to silence me or to cover their tracks. Kael's expression remains impassive, but internally he is evaluating the risk. Using her as bait is dangerous. If the conspirator is ruthless enough, they will not hesitate to eliminate her. But the strategy is sound. You understand the risk. Elira's jaw tightens. I understand that doing nothing is a greater risk. I did not survive this long by playing it safe. Kael studies her, searching for doubt. He finds none. Very well. We will proceed, but on my terms. You will not act alone. Edric will assign protection. Elira's eyes flash. I do not need... It is not negotiable. Kael's tone is absolute. You want resources. That includes my security. Accept it or abandon the plan. The standoff lasts several seconds. Then Elra nods curtly. Fine. Kael turns to leave, then pauses. One more thing. If this goes wrong, if you are harmed because of recklessness, I will consider that a failure on your part. Not mine. Elira's lips curve into a sharp smile. Understood, Duke Viermont. I would expect nothing less. Kael walks away, but he feels her gaze on his back. She is fearless, perhaps dangerously so. But fear is not what concerns him. It is the possibility that she might be right, that someone within his inner circle has been playing a longer game than he anticipated, and Kael does not tolerate being outmaneuvered. Assess. The trap is set the following day. Kael ensures that the false information reaches the right ears through carefully orchestrated conversations. Torrin mentions to Lord Thale that Elra has made a breakthrough. Countess Selwyn overhears a guard discussing increased security around the records room. Victor is informed directly by Kael that a presentation of evidence will occur tomorrow evening in the private council chamber. Kael watches the reactions closely. Thale grows visibly nervous, his usual bluster replaced by fidgeting and evasive eye contact. Selwyn remains composed, though she asks pointed questions about the nature of the evidence. Victor's response is measured, professional, but Kael detects a subtle tension in his jaw. All three are possibilities, but only one will act. As night falls, Kael positions himself in the shadows near Elira's quarters. Sir Edric and two trusted guards are stationed nearby, out of sight but ready. Elra is inside, the light from her window visible in the courtyard below. To any observer, she appears to be working late, vulnerable, and alone. Hours pass. The castle settles into the deep quiet of midnight. Kael's focus does not waver. He has spent years cultivating patience, and this is no different. Then, movement. A figure crosses the courtyard, moving with deliberate stealth. Kael tenses, his hand instinctively moving to the blade at his side. The figure approaches Elira's door, pausing to glance around before producing a key. Kael steps forward, his voice cutting through the darkness. I would not do that if I were you. The figure freezes. Slowly, they turn, and Kael's suspicion is confirmed. Lord Victor Harrow stands in the moonlight, his expression shifting from shock to calculation in an instant. My lord. Victor's voice is smooth, controlled. I was concerned for Lady Voss's safety. Given the sensitive nature of her work, save the performance, Victor. Kael's tone is ice. You are here to silence her, or to retrieve whatever evidence you believe she has found. Victor's mask slips, just slightly. A flicker of something cold and dangerous replaces the courteous facade. You misunderstand, Kael. I am here to protect your interests. This woman is a distraction, a liability. She stirs unrest, questions authority. I am simply removing an obstacle. Kael steps closer, his presence overwhelming. You orchestrated the border weaknesses, the attack on House Voss, all of it designed to destabilize the Eastern Territories and position yourself as the solution. Victor's smile is thin, humorless. You are always too isolated, Kael, too rigid. The court needs flexibility, leadership that understands compromise. I offered you the Draymore Alliance, a chance to solidify power through traditional means, but you hesitated, and hesitation is weakness. Kael's voice drops to a lethal calm. You mistook patience for weakness. That was your first mistake. Your second was believing I would not see through your manipulations. Victor's hand moves toward his belt, but before he can draw a weapon, Sir Edric and the guards emerge from the shadows surrounding him. Victor freezes, realizing the trap is closed. Kael steps forward, his gaze unyielding. You will confess. Every detail, every ally, every transaction, and then you will face the consequences of betraying this house. Victor's expression hardens, defiance flashing in his eyes. You think you have won? The court will fracture without me. You are powerful, Kael, but you are alone. And power without support is nothing. Kael's lips curve into something cold and final. I have never relied on support, Victor. I have relied on control. And you have just demonstrated why that approach is correct. He turns to Edric. Take him to the dungeons. Begin the interrogation at dawn. The guard sees Victor, dragging him away. He does not resist, but his gaze remains fixed on Kael, cold and calculating even in defeat. The door to Elira's quarters opens, and she steps out, her expression unreadable. I heard voices. Kael nods. It is done. Victor was the architect. Elira crosses her arms, her gaze sharp. And the others? Thale? Selwyn? Complicit or opportunistic? We will determine which during the interrogation. Kael's tone is measured. You were right. The trap worked. Elira's eyes narrow. You doubted it would? Kael meets her gaze. I doubted Victor would be reckless enough to act personally. He surprised me. That does not happen often. Elira steps closer, her voice low. What happens now? Kael considers the question. Now we dismantle the conspiracy, expose every thread, and ensure that no one in this court forgets what happens when they mistake my restraint for vulnerability. Elira nods slowly. And what about me? Kael's expression does not soften, but something shifts in his tone. You have proven useful. You will remain under my protection. But understand this, Elira Voss. You exist within my domain at my discretion. Do not mistake this outcome for partnership. Elira's gaze does not waver. I do not mistake anything, Duke Viermont. I know exactly where I stand. They hold each other's gaze, the tension between them palpable. Then Kael turns and walks away, leaving her standing alone in the courtyard. But even as he moves through the darkened corridors, his mind is elsewhere. Victor's words echo in his thoughts. You are alone, and power without support is nothing. Kael has built his rule on that very principle. Solitude as strength, independence as strategy. Yet tonight, for the first time, he wonders if Victor was right. Not about weakness, but about the cost. The interrogation begins at dawn. Kael presides over it personally, his presence a silent reminder of the consequences of betrayal. Victor, stripped of his titles and bound in the dungeon's cold stone chamber, initially resists. But Kael is patient, methodical. He does not need physical coercion. He dismantles Victor's defenses with precision, piece by piece, leveraging knowledge of the man's ambitions, his fears, his carefully constructed facades. By midday, Victor breaks. He confesses to orchestrating the border weaknesses, hiring mercenaries to attack House Voss, and attempting to manipulate Kael into the Draymore alliance to create dependence on Victor's counsel. Lord Thale was an unwitting pawn, his ambitions exploited without his knowledge. Countess Selwyn provided financial resources, though she believes she was funding legitimate security enhancements, not subterfuge. Kael listens without expression, cataloging every detail. When the confession is complete, he stands, his gaze cold and final. You will be executed at sunset, publicly. The court will witness what happens to those who betray this house. Victor's defiance crumbles. He sags in his chains, broken. Please, exile. I will leave, never return. Kael's voice cuts through the pleading like a blade. Mercy is earned through loyalty. You forfeited that right the moment you chose ambition over duty. There will be no exile, only justice. He leaves the dungeon without another word. Behind him, Victor's sobs echo through the stone corridors, but Kael does not look back. The execution is carried out as promised. The courtyard fills with nobles, guards, and common folk, all summoned to witness the Duke's judgment. Kael stands on the platform, his expression carved from granite, as Victor is led to the block. The executioner's blade falls with brutal finality. The crowd is silent, the message unmistakable. Heir Viramont does not tolerate betrayal. He does not hesitate. He does not forgive. When it is done, Heir addresses the assembly, his voice carrying across the courtyard. Let this serve as a reminder. Power in this dominion is not negotiable. Order is not optional. Those who serve with loyalty will be protected. Those who scheme in shadows will be destroyed. The nobles bow their heads, the guards salute, and the common folk disperse quietly. Heir's authority is reaffirmed, absolute and unassailable. But as he returns to the castle, he feels no satisfaction, only the cold, familiar weight of control. Dates. That evening, Elra finds him on the eastern balcony, the same place where the story began. She approaches without speaking, standing beside him as they both gaze out over the snow-covered valley. After a long silence, she speaks. You did not enjoy that. Heir's voice is quiet, devoid of emotion. Enjoyment is irrelevant. It was necessary. Elra glances at him. Necessary. Is that all it was? Heir turns to face her, his expression unreadable. What else would it be? Elra's gaze is steady. A demonstration, a warning, a reassertion of power, but also a reminder to yourself that you are alone. Heir's jaw tightens. Solitude is not weakness. I did not say it was. Elra's tone is calm, measured. But it is a choice, and every choice has a cost. Heir does not respond. He cannot argue with her logic because it mirrors his own. He has chosen solitude, chosen control, chosen duty over every other consideration. And he has paid the cost in isolation, in the absence of trust, in the relentless vigilance required to maintain power. But tonight, standing beside someone who refuses to be diminished by his authority, Heir wonders if the cost is higher than he has allowed himself to acknowledge. Elra turns to leave, then pauses. Thank you. For protecting me. For believing me. Heir nods once, a curt acknowledgement. You earned it. She smiles faintly. High praise from the Duke of Blackthorn. She walks away, leaving Heir alone on the balcony. The wind cuts through the stone, cold and unforgiving. He watches the snow fall, each flake a perfect isolated fragment. And for the first time in years, Heir allows himself to question whether perfection is the same as strength, or if it is simply another form of cage. What happens when the most powerful man in the North discovers that control is not the same as freedom? When the walls he built to protect himself become the bars of his own prison? Part 2 will reveal the fractures that no amount of power can seal. Drop a comment below with your city and let me know. Is Heir's isolation his greatest strength or his fatal flaw? The snow continues to fall over Blackthorn Keep as Heir stands alone on the eastern balcony, watching the flakes dissolve into the darkness below. Victor's execution should have brought closure, a clean severance of rot from healthy tissue. Instead, it has left something raw and exposed. The court has been reminded of his authority, yes, but authority maintained through constant displays of force is authority under siege. And Heir knows the difference between fear that stabilizes and fear that breeds desperation. He turns from the balcony and walks back into the castle, his footsteps echoing through corridors that suddenly feel too vast, too empty. The stone walls that once represented strength now feel like barriers, not against external threats, but against something he cannot name. Something Elra's words have dragged into the light. Solitude is not weakness. He has told himself this for years. Isolation is strategy. Emotional distance is protection. But standing here now, in the aftermath of betrayal orchestrated by the one advisor he almost trusted, Heir wonders if he has confused protection with imprisonment. He reaches his private chambers and pours himself a drink. The whiskey burns going down, grounding him in physical sensation. Control is not the problem. The control is what kept this dominion from collapsing into chaos when he inherited it at 22. Control is what crushed the fractured nobility and rebuilt order from rubble. But control requires perfect information, and Victor proved that even Heir's carefully constructed intelligence network has blind spots. The real question, the one Heir does not want to examine too closely, is whether those blind spots exist because he has isolated himself so thoroughly that people have learned to operate in the shadows he cannot see. Fear keeps people obedient, but it also makes them careful. And careful people hide their true intentions until it is too late. A knock interrupts his thoughts. Heir sets down the glass, his expression hardening into the mask he wears for everyone. Enter. Torin steps inside, his weathered face grave. My lord, the court is requesting an audience tomorrow. They wish to discuss the transition following Lord Harrow's execution. Kael nods curtly. Granted. Assemble the council at midday. Torin hesitates, and Kael's gaze sharpens. Speak plainly. The older man chooses his words carefully. My lord, there is concern among the nobles. Victor's betrayal has shaken their confidence, not in you, but in the stability of the inner circle. They fear vulnerability. They should fear their own ambitions. Kael's tone is cold. Victor's treachery was his alone. The rest of the council remains intact. Torin's expression does not change, but there is weight in his silence. Finally, he speaks. With respect, my lord, intact is not the same as trusted. As the nobles are wondering who else might harbor resentments, who else might be calculating opportunities. Kael leans back against his desk, crossing his arms. Let them wonder. Paranoia keeps people cautious. Torin inclines his head. As you say, my lord, but I must also inform you that Lord Draymore has sent another message. He is withdrawing his offer of alliance. He states that recent instability makes the arrangement untenable. Kael's jaw tightens imperceptibly. Of course he does. Draymore is a coward who mistakes stability for the absence of conflict. Let him withdraw. We do not need his southern trade routes. Torin's silence is eloquent. They both know that dismissing the Draymore alliance has political costs. The southern provinces represent significant economic leverage, and without that connection, Kael's dominion becomes more isolated. But Kael refuses to be dictated to by fear of isolation. He has built power on self-sufficiency. He will not compromise that foundation for the illusion of partnership. Anything else? Torin hesitates again, and this time Kael recognizes the look. There is something the steward does not want to say. Out with it. Lady Voss has requested to speak with you, privately. Kael's expression does not change, but something shifts in his chest. A tightness he does not acknowledge. When? She is waiting in the library now, if you are amenable. Kael considers dismissing her, asserting control by making her wait. But he finds himself nodding. I will see her. Torin withdraws, and Kael remains still for a long moment. Then he straightens, adjusts his collar, and walks toward the library. He tells himself this is strategy. Elra has proven useful. Maintaining that utility requires occasional engagement, but beneath the rational justifications, there is something else. A pull he does not understand and does not want to examine. The library is dimly lit, the fire burning low in the hearth. Elra stands near the window, her silhouette framed against the snow-covered courtyard beyond. She does not turn when he enters, and Kael feels a flicker of irritation at the presumption. Everyone else in this castle acknowledges his presence immediately. She makes him announce himself. You requested an audience. Elra glances over her shoulder, her expression unreadable. I did. Thank you for coming. Kael crosses to the fireplace, positioning himself where he can observe her without appearing defensive. What do you want? Elra turns to face him fully, her arms crossed. I want to understand something. Why did you help me? Kael's tone is flat. I already answered that question. You did not beg, and I despise inefficiency. Elra shakes her head slowly. That is the answer you gave, not the truth. Kael's gaze hardens. I do not lie. I did not say you lied. I said you did not tell the truth. There is a difference. Elra steps closer, her voice steady. You could have dismissed me the moment I arrived, sent me away with empty condolences and forgotten I existed. Instead, you gave me access to sensitive records, allowed me to investigate within your own castle, and set a trap that exposed your chief advisor. That is not efficiency. That is investment. So I'm asking again, why? Kael's jaw tightens. The silence stretches between them, taut as a drawn bowstring. Finally, he speaks, his voice low and controlled. Because Victor was correct about one thing. I have isolated myself. And isolation creates vulnerabilities. You represented an opportunity to test the loyalty of my inner circle. That is all. Elra's gaze does not waver. That is strategy, not motive. Kael's patience frays. What do you want me to say, Elra? That I was moved by your grief? That I sympathized with your loss? I'm not capable of that kind of sentimentality. Elira's expression softens, just slightly. I do not believe that. Kael's voice turns cold. Then you are a fool. Elira steps closer still, close enough that Kael can see the flecks of gold in her dark eyes. I do not think I am. I think you have convinced yourself that detachment is strength, that caring about anything makes you vulnerable. But I have watched you, Kael. I have seen how you move through this castle. You do not rule through fear alone. You rule through precision. And precision requires understanding. You cannot understand people if you do not, on some level, care about what drives them. Kael's hands clench at his sides. You presume too much. Do I? Elira's tone is challenging, not hostile. Then explain to me why you stood on that balcony tonight, looking like a man questioning everything he has built. Explain why you did not smile when Victor's head fell. Explain why you are here now instead of dismissing me the way you dismiss everyone else. Kael's control fractures just for a moment. His voice drops to something raw and dangerous. Because you are the only person in this entire dominion who refuses to pretend. Everyone else performs their roles. They bow, they defer, they agree. But you stand there and call me a liar to my face, and I cannot decide if that makes you valuable or unbearably reckless. Elira holds his gaze, unflinching. Maybe both. The air between them crackles with tension. Kael feels something shift, a crack in the armor he has spent years forging. He should walk away, reassert distance, remind her that proximity to power does not grant equality. But he does not move. Why did you really come here tonight? Elira's expression softens further, and for the first time since she arrived at Blackthorn, Kael sees genuine vulnerability in her face. Because I am tired of surviving alone. I've spent 3 weeks running, hiding, planning. I thought if I could just find justice for my family, I could move forward. But Victor is dead and I still feel empty. And I realize that revenge is not the same as resolution. Kael understands that emptiness more than he will ever admit. He has filled his life with duty, with control, with relentless forward motion. But beneath it all is a hollow space he refuses to acknowledge. The space where his sister used to exist, the space where trust might have lived if he had allowed it. What do you want from me, Elra? Her answer is simple, devastating in its honesty. I want to stop pretending I do not need anyone. And I want you to stop pretending the same thing. Kael's breath catches. The truth of her words cuts deeper than any blade. He has spent years building walls, convincing himself that independence is the only defense against loss. But those walls have not protected him. They have simply ensured that he faces every threat, every decision, every moment of doubt alone. He should reject her, maintain the boundary, preserve the carefully constructed isolation that has kept him safe. But standing here, looking at someone who sees through every defense he has erected, Kael makes a choice that terrifies him more than any battlefield ever has. I do not know how to do this. Elira's smile is small, tentative. Neither do I. The admission hangs in the air between them. Then, slowly, Elira reaches out and takes his hand. The contact is electric, grounding. Kael does not pull away. For the first time in years, he allows himself to be touched without calculating the strategic implications. They stand like that for a long moment, the fire crackling softly in the hearth, the snow falling outside the window. Then Kael speaks, his voice rough. This changes nothing. I am still the Duke. You are still under my protection. The court cannot see weakness. Elira squeezes his hand gently. I am not asking you to be weak, Kael. I am asking you to be human. Kael does not respond. He does not know how. But he does not let go of her hand. And in that silence, something fundamental shifts. When Elra finally leaves, Kael returns to the balcony. The snow has stopped, leaving the world blanketed in white. He stares out over the valley, his mind turning over everything she said, everything she made him feel. Control is not the problem, but perhaps it is not the solution either. Perhaps true strength is not the absence of vulnerability, but the discipline to choose what is worth being vulnerable for. Kael does not sleep that night. He stands watch over his dominion as he always has. But for the first time, he is not watching for threats. He is watching for possibilities. The next morning, the council convenes. The war room feels different now. The absence of Victor's chair, a visible wound. Kael takes his seat at the head of the table, and the assembled nobles fall silent. Lord Thale looks pale, clearly shaken by how close he came to being implicated. Countess Selwyn's expression is carefully neutral, though Kyle suspects she is recalculating her alliances. Sir Edric stands at attention near the door, his loyalty as unwavering as ever. Lady Isolda and Lord Gareth exchange glances, waiting for Kyle to speak. We are here to address the transition following Lord Harrow's execution. Kael's tone is measured, authoritative. His betrayal was personal, but the damage extends beyond his actions. The court has been destabilized. Trust has been compromised. We will rebuild both. Lord Gareth clears his throat. My lord, the treasury remains stable, but the loss of the Draymore alliance will impact revenue projections. We should consider alternative partnerships. Kael's gaze is steady. Alternative partnerships will be explored, but we will not compromise our position out of desperation. Any alliance we pursue will be on our terms. Lady Isolda leans forward. Duke Viermont, the eastern border situation remains unresolved. With Victor's confession, we know the patrols were compromised, but the mercenaries he hired are still at large. We need a response. Kael nods. Agreed. Sir Edric, you will lead a detachment to the eastern territories. Root out the mercenary camps. Make it clear that operating within our borders carries lethal consequences. Edric salutes. It will be done, my lord. Countess Selwyn speaks, her voice cool and precise. My lord, I must address my own involvement. I provided financial resources that Lord Harrow used to fund his conspiracy. I was deceived, but the responsibility is mine. I offer reparations to the Treasury and submit to whatever judgment you deem appropriate. Kyle studies her. Mira Selwyn is pragmatic, ruthless when necessary, but not treacherous. Her offer is calculated, but it is also genuine. You are manipulated, not complicit. Your resources will be audited to ensure full transparency. Beyond that, your position remains intact. But understand this, Countess. Deception will not be tolerated a second time. Mira inclines her head. Understood, my lord. Lord Thale fidgets, clearly expecting to be addressed. Kael lets him wait, drawing out the silence until the younger lord's discomfort is palpable. Finally, Kael speaks. Lord Thale, your ambitions have made you careless. You allowed Victor to exploit your insecurities. That ends now. You will report directly to Torn for the next 6 months. Prove that you can serve without seeking advancement, and we will revisit your responsibilities. Thale's relief is visible. Yes, my lord. Thank you. Kael lets the silence settle again, then continues. Victor's position will not be filled immediately. I will assume direct oversight of strategic planning until a suitable replacement is identified. This council will operate with increased transparency. Every decision, every allocation, every shift in policy will be documented and reviewed. We will eliminate the shadows that allowed betrayal to fester. The nobles exchange glances, some uneasy, others approving. Kael's message is clear. He is tightening control, but he's also demanding accountability from everyone, including himself. One more matter. Kael's tone shifts, becoming more pointed. Lady Elra Voss has proven herself a valuable asset in exposing the conspiracy. She will remain at Blackthorn as an advisor on eastern border relations. Her insights will inform our security strategies moving forward. The announcement is met with surprised silence. Lady Isolda's eyebrows raise slightly. Countess Selwyn's expression remains unreadable. Lord Gareth looks thoughtful. Only Sir Edric shows no reaction, his loyalty absolute regardless of Kael's decisions. Lord Thale, emboldened by his reprieve, speaks up. My lord, with respect, Lady Voss has no formal training in governance or military strategy. Is it wise to elevate someone so inexperienced? Kael's gaze turns glacial. Lord Thale, you have been given a second chance. Do not squander it by questioning my judgment. Lady Voss identified vulnerabilities that this entire council missed. Her lack of formal training is irrelevant. Results matter. Credentials do not. Thale shrinks back, chastened. Yes, my lord. Kael stands, signaling the end of the meeting. You are dismissed. Torrin will distribute updated protocols by end of day. The nobles file out, their expressions a mix of relief and apprehension. Only Sir Edric remains, waiting until the room is empty before approaching. My lord, if I may speak freely. Kael gestures for him to continue. Edric's voice is low, respectful. The decision to bring Lady Voss into an advisory role will be scrutinized. The court will interpret it as favoritism, or worse, as emotional compromise. Kael's expression does not change. Let them interpret it however they wish. Elra has earned her position through competence. If the court cannot see that, then they are blinded by their own prejudices. Edric nods slowly. As you say, my lord, but I would caution that perception often matters as much as reality in these halls. Kael's jaw tightens. I am aware, Edric, but I will not allow perception to dictate my decisions. Not anymore. Edric studies him for a moment, then salutes. Understood, my lord. As Edric leaves, Kael remains in the war room, staring at the maps on the walls. The Dominion stretches out before him, a tapestry of territories, resources, and vulnerabilities. He has spent years mastering every detail, controlling every variable. But Edric's warning echoes in his mind. Perception matters. Kael has never cared about perception before. He ruled through results, through undeniable competence. But Victor's betrayal has taught him that perception creates opportunities for those who know how to exploit it. If the court believes he is compromised, they will test him. And if they test him, he will have to respond with force. Again and again. Until the cycle of distrust becomes self-perpetuating. Unless he changes the equation, Kael turns and leaves the war room, his mind already formulating a plan. If the court needs reassurance, he will provide it. But not through weakness, through demonstration. He finds Elra in the eastern wing, reviewing patrol maps with Torin. She looks up as he enters, her expression questioning. Kael addresses Torin first. Leave us. Torin nods and withdraws. When they are alone, Elra sets down the map. What is it? Kael crosses to the window, looking out over the courtyard. The council has concerns about your new position. They see it as favoritism. Elra's tone is dry. Of course they do. Kael turns to face her. I need you to prove them wrong, publicly. Elra crosses her arms. How? By leading the investigation into the mercenary camps. You identified the conspiracy. Now you will dismantle its remnants. Edric will provide military support, but you will direct the operation. Find the mercenaries Victor hired. Extract intelligence on who else might be involved. And do it with enough precision that the court cannot dismiss your competence. Elra's eyes narrow. You are using me to make a point. Kael does not deny it. Yes, but I'm also trusting you with a task that matters. The eastern border is vulnerable. If we do not neutralize the threat, Victor's conspiracy continues even after his death. You have the skills, you have the motivation, and you have my full support. Elra studies him, searching for hidden agendas. Finally, she nods. All right, but I do this my way. No micromanaging, no second-guessing. Kael's lips quirk into something almost resembling a smile. I would expect nothing less. Elra steps closer, her voice dropping. Kael, if I do this, if I succeed, it changes things. The court will have to acknowledge me, and that means they will scrutinize us even more closely. Kael meets her gaze. I know. And you are willing to accept that? Kael's expression hardens into something resolute. I am willing to redefine what power looks like in this dominion. Fear and isolation have their limits. Perhaps it is time to demonstrate that strength can coexist with trust. Elra's eyes soften. That is a dangerous philosophy for a man like you. Kael's voice is quiet, almost vulnerable. Everything about this is dangerous, but I'm beginning to think that safety is overrated. Elra reaches out and touches his arm, a brief contact that grounds them both. Then I will not fail you. Kael covers her hand with his, just for a moment. I know. She leaves to begin preparations, and Kael stands alone in the room. The decision is made. He is committed to a path that exposes him in ways he has spent years avoiding. But for the first time in a long time, that exposure does not feel like weakness. It feels like choice. And choice, Kael is beginning to understand, is the truest form of power. Over the next week, Elra assembles her team. Sir Edric provides 20 of his best soldiers, men who have proven themselves in combat and can operate with discretion. Elra spends hours studying the terrain, reviewing intelligence reports, and planning the operation with a level of detail that impresses even Torin. She does not ask for Kael's input, and he does not offer it. This is her test, and she will succeed or fail on her own merits. But Kael watches. From the shadows, from the margins, he observes her work. She is methodical, decisive, unafraid to challenge assumptions. When one of Edric's lieutenants questions her strategy, she does not defer. She explains her reasoning with clarity and confidence, then asks if he has a better alternative. He does not. Kyle finds himself admiring her in ways that have nothing to do with strategy or utility. She is not performing strength, she is wielding it, and the difference is everything. The night before the operation, Kyle finds her in the armory, inspecting weapons and supplies. She does not look up when he enters, her focus absolute. Are you ready? Elra glances at him briefly. As ready as I can be. Kyle approaches, standing beside her. Doubt is natural. I am not doubting the plan. Elra sets down the blade she was examining. I am doubting whether I can live with what comes after. Kyle's expression sharpens. Explain. Elra turns to face him fully. If I succeed, I prove myself to your court. I become part of the power structure here. And that means I am complicit in everything you do. Every harsh decision, every ruthless calculation. I'm not sure I am ready for that. Kyle considers her words carefully. You think I am cruel. Elra shakes her head. I think you are uncompromising, and I understand why. But I also know that uncompromising rulers often lose sight of the line between justice and vengeance. Kyle's jaw tightens. Victor deserved death. I'm not arguing that. Elra's voice is steady. But what about the next person? And the next? At what point does your need for control become indistinguishable from tyranny? Kyle's voice drops, cold and dangerous. You think I am a tyrant? Elra does not flinch. I think you are capable of becoming one. If you are not careful. The silence that follows is suffocating. Kyle feels anger flare, hot and defensive. But beneath it is something else. Fear. Because she is right. He has spent years walking the edge between discipline and cruelty, between strength and oppression. And he does not know if he can trust himself to see the difference anymore. Finally he speaks, his voice rough. Then you will be my mirror. When I cross the line, you will tell me. Elra's eyes widen slightly. That is a dangerous role. Kyle's gaze is unwavering. Everything about you is dangerous, Elra. But I would rather have you beside me questioning my choices than standing in the shadows plotting against me. Elra's expression softens. You are trusting me. Kyle nods slowly. Against every instinct I have, yes. Elra steps closer, her voice quiet. Then I will not betray that trust. Kyle reaches out, cupping her face in his hand. The gesture is uncharacteristically tender, and he sees her breath catch. I know. They stand like that for a long moment, the weight of what they are building settling between them. Then Elra steps back, breaking the contact. I should finish preparations. Kyle nods, though something in him resists letting her go. Be careful tomorrow. Elra's smile is small but genuine. Always. She leaves and Kyle remains in the armory, surrounded by weapons and the echoes of their conversation. He has just given someone the power to challenge him, to question him, to hold him accountable. It is the most reckless thing he has ever done. And yet, it feels like the first truly strategic decision he has made in years. The operation launches at dawn. Kyle watches from the battlements as Elra and Edric's detachment ride out through the eastern gate. The snow has returned, light flurries that blur the edges of the landscape. Kyle does not pray. He does not believe in divine intervention. But he does find himself hoping, a fragile thing he has not allowed himself to feel in a long time. Hours pass. Kyle occupies himself with administrative tasks, reviewing budgets and trade agreements. But his focus is fractured, his mind constantly returning to the eastern border. Torin notices but says nothing, his discretion as reliable as ever. It is late afternoon when the first messenger arrives. Kyle meets him in the courtyard, his expression impassive despite the tension coiling in his chest. Report. The messenger, a young guard with mud splattered across his uniform, salutes. My lord, Lady Voss has engaged the mercenary camp. Initial contact was successful. They are extracting prisoners for interrogation now. Casualties? Minor injuries on our side. 3 mercenaries dead, 7 captured. No losses among our forces. Kale nods curtly. Send word when they return. The messenger salutes and withdraws. Kyle allows himself a brief moment of relief, then buries it beneath layers of discipline. The operation is not complete. There is still time for complications. But when Elra returns that evening, leading a column of soldiers and bound prisoners, Kyle feels something crack inside him. She's covered in dirt and blood, her face pale with exhaustion, but her eyes are sharp, triumphant. She dismounts in the courtyard, and the assembled guards and nobles part to let her through. She approaches Kael, stopping a respectful distance away. Mission complete, my lord. 7 prisoners secured, intelligence extracted. The mercenary network has been dismantled. Kael's expression does not change, but his voice carries a note of approval. Well done. Report to the council chamber in 1 hour. We will review your findings. Elra nods, then turns to address the soldiers. You all performed with honor. See to your wounded and rest. You have earned it. The guards respond with a cheer, a rare show of enthusiasm. Kael watches as Elra walks toward the castle, her shoulders straight despite obvious fatigue. She has proven herself, not just to him, but to the entire court. And in doing so, she has rewritten the rules. The council meeting that follows is tense but productive. Elra presents her findings with precision, detailing the mercenary network's structure, their financial backers, and the extent of Victor's reach. The intelligence reveals connections to 2 minor noble houses in the southern territories, neither of whom Kael had suspected. Lord Gareth leans forward, his expression grave. This is more extensive than we thought. Kael's voice is cold. Then we will be thorough in our response. Countess Selwyn, you will audit the finances of both houses. If they were complicit, we seize their assets. Lady Isolda, you will coordinate with the southern governors to ensure there are no additional conspirators. The nobles nod, their earlier skepticism of Elra replaced by grudging respect. She has delivered results, and results are the currency Kael values most. When the meeting adjourns, Kael finds Elra alone in the corridor outside the chamber. She leans against the wall, her exhaustion finally showing. You should rest. Elra glances at him, a faint smile on her lips. I will. After I clean the blood off. Kael steps closer, his voice dropping. You exceeded expectations. Elra's smile widens slightly. High praise from the Duke of Blackthorn. Kael does not smile, but his gaze softens. I mean it, Elra. You have proven yourself in ways I did not anticipate. The court will not forget this. Elra's expression grows serious. And what about you, Kael? What will you not forget? Kael hesitates, then speaks with rare honesty. That I was wrong. About isolation, about control, about what it means to be strong. Elra reaches out, touching his hand briefly. Then we are both learning. They stand like that for a moment, the corridor empty around them. Then Elra pulls away, heading toward her quarters. Kael watches her go, feeling the weight of everything shifting beneath him. He has spent years building walls. Now, slowly, deliberately, he is beginning to dismantle them. And the most terrifying part is that he does not know what will remain when they are gone. But for the first time in his life, Kael is willing to find out. The weeks following Elra's successful operation bring a fragile equilibrium to Blackthorn Keep. The court has witnessed her competence, and while some nobles still harbor resentment at her rapid ascent, none can deny the results she delivered. The mercenary network has been dismantled, the complicit southern houses have been stripped of their assets, and the eastern border is more secure than it has been in months. Kael finds himself relying on her judgment in ways he never anticipated, consulting her on matters that extend far beyond border security. She has become more than an advisor. She has become a sounding board, a mirror held up to his decisions, reflecting back truths he would have once dismissed as weakness. But power never rests comfortably. It is a living thing, constantly shifting, always hungry. And those who hunger for it are patient, calculating, willing to wait for the perfect moment to strike. Kael stands in his private study, reviewing reports from the southern provinces. The seizure of assets from the complicit houses has created economic ripples, destabilizing trade routes and creating opportunities for ambitious merchants to fill the vacuum. Normally, this would be a manageable transition, a reshuffling of resources that Kael could control through strategic investments and carefully placed tariffs. But something about the pattern troubles him. The disruptions are too coordinated, the timing too precise. It feels orchestrated, though he cannot identify the conductor. A knock at the door interrupts his thoughts. Come. Torrin enters, his expression more grave than usual. My lord, we have received a message from Lady Crane. She requests an urgent audience. Kael sets down the report, his focus sharpening. Lady Isolda rarely requests anything urgently. She is methodical. preferring to handle matters through carefully worded letters and strategic social gatherings. For her to demand immediate attention suggests something significant has shifted. When? She is waiting in the eastern parlor now, my lord. Kale rises, adjusting his coat. Inform her I will be there shortly. Torin hesitates, and Kael recognizes the look. There is more. Speak. Lady Voss returned from the eastern estates an hour ago. She appeared agitated. She has requested to see you as well, but separately from Lady Crane. Kael's jaw tightens. Where is she now? In the library, my lord. Kael considers the situation. 2 urgent requests from 2 key allies, both arriving simultaneously, both demanding private audiences. Coincidence is rarely coincidental in his world. Send word to Lady Voss that I will see her immediately after Lady Crane. And Torin, position guards discreetly near both locations. I want to know if either of them attempts to leave before our meetings conclude. Torin's expression remains neutral, but Kael catches the flicker of understanding. As you wish, my lord. When Torin withdraws, Kael stands alone for a moment, his instincts screaming warnings he cannot yet articulate. Something is wrong. The air feels charged, the way it does before a storm breaks. He has learned to trust these instincts, to recognize the subtle shifts in atmosphere that precede betrayal. Victor taught him that lesson thoroughly. Kael walks through the corridors toward the eastern parlor, his mind racing through possibilities. Lady Isolda controls the grain estates, the agricultural backbone of the Northern Dominion. If she has turned against him, she could starve the populace into submission within months. But Isolda has always been pragmatic, more interested in stability than chaos. She benefits from this current structure. Why would she risk destabilizing it now, unless someone has offered her something more valuable than stability? Something worth the gamble. Kael enters the parlor to find Lady Isolda standing near the window, her back to the door. She does not turn immediately, and Kael allows the silence to stretch, observing. Her posture is rigid, controlled, but there is tension in her shoulders that speaks to internal conflict. When she finally turns, her face is composed, but her eyes carry something harder than Kael has seen before. Lady Crane, you requested an audience. Isolda inclines her head, the gesture respectful but lacking its usual warmth. Duke Viramont, thank you for seeing me on such short notice. Kael gestures to the chairs near the fireplace. Shall we sit? I prefer to stand. What I have to say will not take long. Kael's expression does not change, but internally he braces. Very well. Speak. Isolda's gaze is direct, unflinching. I have come to inform you that I am withdrawing my support from your administration. Effective immediately, the Western Grain Estates will no longer supply resources under the current terms. I am renegotiating contracts with independent brokers. The words land like blows, precisely aimed and devastatingly effective. Kael's mind immediately calculates the implications. The Western Estates provide 40% of the Dominion's food supply. Without those resources, Blackthorn faces rationing within weeks, potential famine within months. And independent brokers mean she is selling to whoever offers the best price, likely competitors or rival houses seeking to weaken his position. Kael's voice is cold, controlled. That is a declaration of economic warfare, Isolda. She does not flinch. I prefer to call it self-preservation. Kael steps closer, his presence overwhelming. Explain. Isolda's composure cracks just slightly. You have become reckless, Kael. You executed your chief advisor without considering the broader implications. You elevated a nobody to a position of influence based on sentiment rather than strategy. And now you are seizing assets from southern houses, creating chaos in trade networks that took decades to build. I have supported you through difficult decisions before, but I will not stand beside a ruler who prioritizes personal vendettas over the stability of the realm. Kael's jaw tightens. Victor's execution was justice. The southern houses were complicit in conspiracy, and Elra has proven her worth through results. None of those decisions were reckless. Isolda's eyes flash. You do not see it, do you? You are so consumed by your need for control that you cannot recognize when you are losing it. The court is fracturing, Kael. Nobles are questioning your judgment. Merchants are hedging their investments. And I will not go down with a sinking ship. Kael's voice drops to something lethal. You think I am weak. I think you are compromised. Isolda's tone is almost pitying. I think that woman has gotten inside your head. And now you're making decisions with your heart instead of your mind. That is weakness, Kael, and I will not be destroyed by your weakness. The accusation stings more than Kael will ever admit because there is truth buried within it. He has changed since Elra arrived. He has allowed considerations beyond pure strategy to influence his choices. But he has also become more effective, more adaptable, more capable of navigating the complexities of human motivation. Isolde sees only the deviation from his previous ruthlessness. She does not see the evolution. Kael's voice is steel. If you withdraw your support, you become an enemy. I do not tolerate enemies within my borders. Isolde meets his gaze without fear. Then I will leave your borders. I've already made arrangements to relocate to the southern provinces. My estates will continue to operate, but under new management that is not beholden to your authority. Kael's mind races. She has planned this meticulously, secured alternative arrangements before confronting him. This is not a spontaneous decision born of frustration. This is a calculated defection. And defections of this magnitude do not happen in isolation. Someone convinced her. Someone offered her guarantees that outweighed the risks. Who promised you protection? Isolde's expression closes off. That is not your concern. Kael steps even closer, his voice barely above a whisper. Everything within this dominion is my concern, and you will answer the question. Isolde's composure finally shatters, fear flickering across her features. I am leaving, Kael. You cannot stop me without proving everything I just said about your instability. If you imprison me, if you execute me, you will only validate the court's worst fears. You have already lost. You simply refuse to see it. She turns and walks toward the door. Kael watches her go, every instinct screaming at him to stop her, to assert control, to demonstrate that defiance carries consequences. But Isolde is right about one thing. If he responds with violence, he plays into the narrative that he is unstable, that his judgment is compromised. And that narrative will spread faster than any truth he can construct. So he lets her leave. Not out of mercy, but out of calculation. Because stopping her now would cost him more than letting her go. When the door closes, Kael stands alone in the parlor, his mind dissecting every word of the conversation. Isolde was not bluffing. She has already relocated her loyalty, already secured alternative arrangements, which means someone with significant resources and influence has been working against him, quietly turning his allies into enemies, eroding his foundation one carefully placed promise at a time. And if Isolde has turned, who else has been compromised? Kael leaves the parlor and walks swiftly toward the library. He needs to speak with Elra, needs to understand what she discovered on the eastern estates that has her agitated. As he moves through the corridors, guards salute, servants bow, all the rituals of deference playing out as they always have. But Kael sees them differently now. How many are loyal? How many are waiting for the right moment to abandon him? He reaches the library and finds Elra pacing near the window, her movements sharp and restless. She turns when he enters, and the look on her face stops him cold. It is not agitation. It is devastation. What happened? Elra's voice is hoarse, strained. I found something. On the eastern estates. Evidence I wish I had not found. Kael closes the distance between them. Show me. Elra reaches into her coat and pulls out a folded letter, the parchment worn and stained with travel. She hands it to him without speaking. Kael unfolds it, his eyes scanning the contents. The handwriting is elegant, precise. The signature at the bottom makes his blood run cold. It is from Countess Mira Selwyn, addressed to a contact in the southern provinces. The letter details a plan to destabilize Kael's rule through economic warfare, to turn his allies against him by exploiting his recent decisions, and to position an alternative ruler who would be more amenable to negotiation. The letter is dated 3 weeks ago, before Victor's execution, before Elra's operation, before any of the recent turmoil began. Mira Selwyn has been orchestrating this from the beginning. Kael's hands tighten on the parchment. Where did you find this? Elra's voice is barely above a whisper. In a courier's satchel. The courier was one of ours, Kael. One of the men assigned to protect the eastern border. He was carrying correspondence between Mira and her conspirators. When I confronted him, he tried to run. We captured him, but he took poison before we could extract information. Kael's mind is a maelstrom. Mira Selwyn. The woman who offered reparations, who submitted to audits, who played the role of chastened ally so perfectly that Kael believed her. She has been playing him since Victor's death, positioning herself as reformed while simultaneously dismantling his support network from within. And if Mira is the architect, then Isolda's defection was not spontaneous. It was part of the plan. Carefully timed. Precisely executed. Kael's voice is lethal calm. Where is Mira now? Elra meets his gaze and he sees the answer in her eyes before she speaks. She left the castle this morning, claimed she was inspecting her mining operations. By now, she is probably halfway to the southern border. Kael's control fractures. He slams his fist into the nearby table, the impact reverberating through the room. Elra flinches but does not step back. She stands her ground, watching him with a mixture of sympathy and fear. How did I miss this? Kael's voice is raw, stripped of its usual precision. I audited her finances. I scrutinized her movements. How did she operate under my nose for weeks without detection? Elra's response is quiet but cutting. Because she understood you, Kael. She knew you would be watching for grand gestures, obvious betrayals. So she made small moves, incremental shifts. She played the long game while you were focused on immediate threats. Kael forces himself to breathe, to think. Mira's strategy is brilliant in its simplicity. She did not challenge him directly. She eroded his foundation gradually, turning allies into doubters, creating an atmosphere of instability that made defection seem rational. And now, with Isolda gone and Mira fled, Kael is left holding a dominion that is bleeding support from multiple wounds. He looks at Elra, searching for answers in her face. What else did you find? Elra hesitates, and that hesitation tells Kael everything. There is more. Something worse. Speak. Elra's voice breaks. The letter mentions an alternative ruler. Someone Mira believes the court will accept. Someone already positioned within Blackthorn. Kael's blood turns to ice. Who? Elra's eyes fill with tears, and she looks away. The letter does not name them, but it describes them. A figure with growing influence. Someone the Duke has recently elevated. Someone the court sees as a moderating force. The implication crashes over Kael like a tidal wave. They think it is you. Elra nods, the tears spilling over. They are using me, Kael. They have been using me from the beginning. My arrival, my investigation, my success. All of it has positioned me as a viable alternative to your rule. And I did not see it. I was so focused on justice for my family that I did not realize I was being weaponized. Kael's mind reels. Every decision he made, every risk he took, has been turned against him. He elevated Elra to demonstrate strength through trust. Instead, he created the perception of weakness, of a ruler distracted by sentiment. Mira saw that perception and exploited it, using Elra's presence to fracture the court's confidence in his judgment. And the worst part, the part that guts him more than any betrayal, is that Elra is devastated by this revelation. She did not seek power. She did not manipulate him. She was simply trying to survive, and in doing so, became the unwitting centerpiece of a conspiracy designed to dethrone him. Kael crosses to her, his movement slow, deliberate. Elra, look at me. She turns, her face streaked with tears. I am so sorry. I never wanted this. I know. Kael's voice is rough but sincere. This is not your fault. It does not matter whose fault it is. Elra's voice breaks. The damage is done. If I stay, if I remain in your court, I validate everything they are saying. I become the evidence of your compromised judgment. But if I leave, they win anyway because it looks like you could not control me. Kael's hands curl into fists. Neither of those outcomes is acceptable. Then what do we do? Elra's desperation is palpable. How do we fight something that has already been set in motion? Kael's mind races, cycling through strategies and discarding them just as quickly. Traditional responses will not work here. If he hunts down Mira and Isolda, he appears vengeful. If he publicly denounces Elra, he appears weak. If he does nothing, the conspiracy continues to erode his authority until the court openly rebels. There is only one move that disrupts the entire board. One choice that redefines the conflict on his terms rather than theirs. Kael meets Elra's gaze, his decision crystallizing. We do not fight their narrative. We destroy it completely. Elra's eyes widen. How? Kael's voice is cold, resolute, by giving them exactly what they claim to want. A change in leadership, but not the change they expect. Elra shakes her head, confused. I do not understand. Kael steps closer, his presence overwhelming. They believe I am weak because I elevated you. They believe I am compromised because I allowed sentiment to influence strategy. So I will prove them wrong. I will demonstrate that my decisions were not weakness. They were evolution. Elra's expression shifts from confusion to horror as she begins to understand. Kael, no. You cannot. I can. And I will. Kael's tone leaves no room for argument. Tomorrow, I will convene the full court. I will announce that I am restructuring the governance of this dominion. I will create a dual authority, sharing power between the Duke and a newly established council leader. And I will appoint you to that position. Elra's voice is frantic. That is insane. You would be legitimizing their conspiracy, handing them exactly what they wanted. Kael's smile is sharp, dangerous. No, I would be redefining power in a way they cannot anticipate. They expect me to cling to absolute control. They expect me to fight against sharing authority. So I will do the opposite. I will embrace it. And in doing so, I will expose their true motives. Elra stares at him, searching for sanity in his eyes. This could destroy you. Kael's voice is quiet but unyielding. I am already being destroyed. This is the only move that changes the equation. The silence between them is suffocating. Elra's mind is visibly working through the implications, the risks, the potential outcomes. Finally, she speaks, her voice barely above a whisper. If I accept this, if I become council leader, I will be trapped. They will expect me to oppose you, to undermine you. And if I do not, they will turn on me as well. Kael nods. I know. That is why this only works if we are completely united. No secrets, no independent agendas. We act as one, or we both fall. Elra's tears have stopped, replaced by something harder, more resolved. You are asking me to trust you with my life. Kael's gaze is unwavering. I am trusting you with mine. The weight of that truth settles over them. This is not strategy. This is faith. And faith is the most dangerous gamble either of them has ever made. Elra exhales slowly, then nods. All right, we do this together. Kael reaches out and takes her hand, the contact grounding them both. Together. But as they stand there, hands clasped, Kael cannot shake the feeling that he has just stepped off a cliff. He is gambling everything on the belief that shared power is stronger than absolute control. That trust can outmaneuver conspiracy. That two people united can withstand the forces arrayed against them. And if he is wrong, they will both be destroyed. The announcement is made the following morning. The court assembles in the great hall, nobles and advisors crowding the space, whispers rippling through the crowd like wildfire. Kael stands on the dais, Elra beside him, their expressions unreadable. Torrin stands near the entrance, Sir Edric flanking the opposite side, both men poised for potential conflict. Kael's voice cuts through the murmurs, commanding immediate silence. I have convened this assembly to address the instability that has plagued our dominion in recent weeks. Betrayal has been exposed, alliances have fractured, and questions have been raised about the effectiveness of centralized authority. The nobles exchange glances, uncertainty and anticipation warring on their faces. Kael continues, his tone measured but forceful. I have spent years ruling this dominion through absolute control, and that control has brought stability, prosperity, and security. But it has also created vulnerabilities. Concentrating power in a single authority means that undermining that authority threatens the entire structure. Lord Gareth leans forward, his expression cautious. My lord, what are you proposing? Kael's gaze sweeps the room. I am proposing evolution. Effective immediately, the governance of this dominion will be restructured. I will retain the title of Duke and final authority over military and external affairs. But internal governance, resource allocation, and judicial matters will be overseen by a newly established council leader. This position will carry equal authority within its domain and will serve as a check on unilateral decisions. The hall erupts in shocked whispers. Countess Selwyn's absence is conspicuous, as is Lady Isolda's. But the remaining nobles look stunned, clearly unprepared for this announcement. Lord Thale's mouth hangs open. Lord Gareth's expression is calculating, already working through implications. Sir Edric's face remains stoic, though Kael catches the flicker of concern in his eyes. Kael raises a hand, and the crowd quiets. I have selected Lady Elra Voss to serve as the first council leader. Her competence has been demonstrated through her successful dismantling of the mercenary conspiracy. Her judgment is sound, and her perspective offers balance to my own. The whispers intensify, shock mixing with calculation. This is exactly what Mira's conspiracy intended, but presented in a way that reframes the entire conflict. Kael has not been forced into sharing power. He has chosen it, and that choice robs the conspirators of their narrative. Lord Thale, emboldened by the chaos, stands. Duke Viramont, with respect, this is unprecedented. Dividing authority in this manner could create paralysis. What happens when you and Lady Voss disagree? Kael's gaze is cold. Then we negotiate, like rational leaders. The expectation that authority must be absolute to be effective is a fallacy. History is filled with examples of shared governance that achieved greater stability than tyranny ever could. Lord Gareth speaks, his tone cautious. My lord, the court will need time to adjust to this structure. There will be questions about jurisdiction, about lines of authority. Kael nods. Those questions will be addressed through the establishment of clear protocols. Torn will draft the governing documents, and they will be reviewed by the full council before implementation. This is not chaos. This is deliberate restructuring. Elra steps forward, her voice steady despite the weight of every eye in the room upon her. I accept this responsibility with full awareness of its challenges. I do not seek to undermine Duke Viramont's authority. I seek to complement it. Together, we will address the concerns that have fractured this court and rebuild trust through transparency and accountability. The nobles remain silent, processing. Some look skeptical. Others look intrigued. A few look calculating, already positioning themselves to exploit the new structure. But none openly object. Because to object now would be to admit that they preferred the old system where conspiracy could flourish in shadows. Kael has forced them into a position where supporting the new structure is the only rational choice. Kael's voice cuts through the silence. This assembly is adjourned. Council reconvenes in 3 days to review the governance protocols. Until then, business continues as usual. The nobles file out slowly, their whispers resuming once they are beyond Kael's immediate presence. Kael and Elra remain on the dais, watching them go. When the hall is finally empty, Elra turns to him. That was the most dangerous thing I have ever witnessed. Kael's expression does not change. Necessary risks always are. Elra's voice drops. What happens when Mira hears about this? Kael's smile is cold, predatory. She will realize that her carefully constructed plan has been turned against her. She wanted to position you as an alternative ruler. I have made you a partner instead. And in doing so, I have eliminated the leverage she thought she had. Elra nods slowly, understanding dawning. Because if I am already in a position of authority, there is no reason for the court to support a conspiracy to put me there. Exactly. Kael's tone is grim. Mira's entire strategy depended on creating dissatisfaction with my rule and offering you as a solution. By preemptively sharing power, I have removed the incentive for defection. Elra's expression hardens, but she will not give up. She has invested too much. Kael's gaze is steady. I know, which is why we need to move quickly. Torin will trace her movements, identify her allies, and expose the full extent of the conspiracy. And when we have proof, we will destroy her. Publicly. Completely. Elra meets his eyes. This is not just about power anymore, is it? Kael's voice is quiet, honest. No. This is about survival, hers or ours, and I have no intention of being the one who falls. They stand together on the empty dais, the weight of what they have just done settling over them. Kael has rewritten the rules of his own dominion, gambled his absolute authority on the belief that shared power can be stronger than solitary control. It is a philosophy that contradicts everything he has built his life upon. Everything he believed kept him safe. But safety, Kael is beginning to understand, is an illusion. The only real security comes from adaptability, from the willingness to evolve when circumstances demand it. And if that evolution requires trusting someone else, requires sharing the burden of leadership, then perhaps that is not weakness after all. Perhaps it is the only true strength. Over the next 3 days, Blackthorn Keep transforms into a hive of activity. Torin works tirelessly to draft governance protocols, establishing clear boundaries between Kael's military authority and Elra's internal governance. Messengers are dispatched to track Mira's movements, to identify her network of supporters, to build a case that can withstand scrutiny. Sir Edric increases security throughout the castle, positioning loyal guards at key locations to prevent further defections. And Kael and Elra work side by side, learning to navigate the complexities of shared leadership. They disagree frequently, their approaches shaped by different experiences and philosophies. But those disagreements are productive, forcing both of them to defend their positions with logic rather than authority. Slowly, a new dynamic emerges. Not subordination, not dominance, but partnership. On the evening before the council reconvenes, Kael finds Elra in the war room, studying the maps that cover the walls. She does not look up when he enters, her focus absolute. You should rest. Tomorrow will be difficult. Elra glances at him briefly. I could say the same to you. Kael crosses to stand beside her, following her gaze across the territorial boundaries. What are you thinking? Elra's voice is thoughtful. I am thinking that borders are easier to defend than hearts. You can fortify a wall, position guards, anticipate invasions, but how do you protect against someone who gets inside your trust and dismantles you from within? Kael's expression is grim. You do not. You can only choose carefully who you allow close, and accept that every choice carries risk. Elra turns to face him. Do you regret choosing to trust me? Kael meets her gaze without hesitation. No. Even though it has cost you allies, even though it has destabilized your rule. Kael's voice is quiet but firm. What I regret is not recognizing sooner that absolute control is its own vulnerability. Victor understood that. Mira understood that. They exploited my isolation because they knew I had no one to warn me when I was being outmaneuvered. You are not the cause of my instability, Elra. You are the reason I have a chance to survive it. Elra's eyes glisten with unshed tears. I do not know if I am strong enough for what you are asking of me. Kael reaches out, cupping her face in his hands. You are the strongest person I have ever met, not because you do not fear, but because you act despite it. Elra leans into his touch, and for a moment the weight of leadership falls away. They are just two people, bound by circumstance and choice, trying to navigate an impossible situation. Kael feels something shift inside him, a wall crumbling that he spent years constructing. He has told himself for so long that emotion is weakness, that attachment creates vulnerability. But standing here, holding someone who sees him completely and chooses to stand beside him anyway, Kael realizes that vulnerability is not the absence of strength. It is the foundation of it. Because strength without vulnerability is just armor, cold, unyielding, and ultimately hollow. But strength tempered by vulnerability, by the willingness to be seen and known and possibly hurt, that is power that cannot be shaken. That is resilience. Kael lowers his hands, stepping back before the moment can deepen into something neither of them is ready to name. Tomorrow, we face the court. Together. Elra nods, wiping her eyes. Together. They leave the war room separately, maintaining the careful distance that public scrutiny demands. But as Kael walks through the darkened corridors back to his chambers, he carries something he has not felt in years. Not certainty, not control, but hope. And hope, dangerous as it is, feels like the first honest thing he has allowed himself in a very long time. The council reconvenes the next morning, and the atmosphere is tense. The governance protocols have been distributed, and the nobles have had time to study the implications. Kael and Elra sit side by side at the head of the table, a physical representation of the new power structure. Torrin stands near the door, a stack of documents in hand. Sir Edric remains at his post, watchful and ready. Lord Gareth opens the discussion, his tone measured. Duke Viramont, Lady Voss, we have reviewed the proposed protocols. They are comprehensive, but there are concerns about implementation. Specifically, what happens in situations where your authorities overlap? Elra responds before Kael can speak, her voice clear and confident. Overlapping authority will be resolved through joint consultation. Neither the Duke nor I will act unilaterally in matters that affect both domains. The protocols outline a mediation process for disputes, with Torrin serving as neutral arbiter if necessary. Lord Thale leans forward. And if mediation fails? If you reach an impasse? Kael's voice is cold. Then the matter escalates to a full council vote, but I do not anticipate frequent impasses. Lady Voss and I are both capable of negotiation. The nobles exchange glances, some skeptical, others cautiously optimistic. Lord Gareth nods slowly. Very well. I move that we approve the protocols as drafted, with the understanding that adjustments may be necessary as we adapt to the new structure. The motion is seconded, and after brief discussion, the protocols are approved. Kael allows himself a moment of relief. The first hurdle is cleared. Now comes the harder part. There is one more matter to address. Kael's tone shifts, becoming harder. We have been tracking the movements of Countess Mira Selwyn since her departure. Evidence has been gathered regarding her involvement in a conspiracy to destabilize this dominion. The room falls silent. Kael gestures to Torin, who steps forward and distributes copies of the letter Elra found, along with additional documents detailing financial transactions, correspondence with southern houses, and courier routes. The nobles read in stunned silence, the magnitude of Mira's betrayal becoming undeniable. Lord Gareth's face pales. This is treason. Kael's voice is ice. Yes, and it will be punished accordingly. Countess Selwyn's assets are hereby seized, her titles are revoked, and a warrant is issued for her arrest. Any house found to have aided her conspiracy will face similar consequences. The message is unmistakable. Kael may have restructured governance, but he has not surrendered his capacity for ruthless justice. The nobles sit in chastened silence, the weight of the evidence before them eliminating any possibility of defense. Elra speaks, her tone measured. Moving forward, this council will operate with full transparency. All financial transactions, all communications with external houses, all resource allocations will be documented and subject to review. We will rebuild trust through accountability, but betrayal will not be tolerated. The meeting continues for another hour, covering logistics and transition details. But the core message has been delivered. Kael and Elra are united. Their authority is legitimate, and those who conspire against them will be destroyed. When the council finally adjourns, Kael and Elra remain in the war room. The tension that has gripped Blackthorn for weeks has not vanished, but it has shifted. The immediate crisis is contained. The conspirators have been exposed, and a new structure is in place, fragile but functional. Elra exhales slowly, the weight of the morning evident on her face. We did it. Kael's expression is grim. We survived the first battle. The war is far from over. Elra turns to him, her gaze searching. Do you think Mira will come back? Try to fight this? Kael considers the question. She is intelligent enough to recognize when she is lost. But intelligence does not always translate to acceptance. She will either flee beyond our reach or attempt one final move. Either way, we remain vigilant. Elra nods, then hesitates. Kael, what you said last night, about vulnerability being strength. Do you believe that? Kael meets her eyes, and for once, he does not hide behind carefully constructed walls. I am beginning to. The admission hangs in the air between them, fragile and profound. They have gambled everything on trust, on partnership, on the belief that two people united can withstand forces that would destroy them individually. And while the outcome is far from certain, while threats still lurk in shadows and conspiracies may yet resurface, they have created something that did not exist before. A foundation built not on fear, but on choice. And choice, Kael is finally learning, is the truest form of power. Because power imposed is always vulnerable to greater force. But power chosen, power shared, power built on mutual respect and genuine partnership that is resilient in ways that tyranny can never be. Kael has spent his entire life believing that solitude was strength, that isolation was protection, that control required absolute authority. But standing here beside Elra, having navigated betrayal and conspiracy and the shattering of everything he thought he understood about leadership, Kael realizes that he was wrong. Strength is not the absence of vulnerability. It is the courage to be vulnerable with the right person. Control is not the elimination of risk. It is the wisdom to choose which risks are worth taking. And power is not about domination. It is about transformation. Kael has transformed, from a ruler who led through fear to a leader who inspires through trust, from a man who stood alone to a partner who shares the burden, from someone who viewed emotion as weakness to someone who recognizes it as the most honest form of strength. The Dominion will continue to face challenges. Mira's conspiracy may have been exposed, but the instability it created will take time to heal. Other rivals will test the new structure, seeking weaknesses to exploit. And Kael and Elra will have to navigate the complexities of shared leadership, learning to balance their different perspectives and approaches. But they will face those challenges together. And that makes all the difference. As the sun sets over Blackthorn Keep, casting long shadows across the courtyard, Kael stands on the eastern balcony one final time. Elra joins him, and they watch the light fade in companionable silence. Finally, Kael speaks, his voice quiet but resolute. "Thank you." Elra glances at him, surprised. For what? For refusing to let me remain alone, for challenging me when I needed it, for standing beside me when it would have been easier to walk away. Elra's smile is small but genuine. "You did the same for me." Kael nods, accepting the truth of that. Then we are even. They stand together as darkness falls, two figures silhouetted against the dying light. The future remains uncertain, fraught with dangers and challenges neither can fully anticipate. But they face it united, bound by something stronger than strategy or obligation. They face it as partners, and in that partnership lies the possibility of something neither believed possible when this story began. Not just survival, but transformation. Not just power, but purpose. Not just control, but freedom. And as the first stars emerge in the night sky, Kael allows himself to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, the walls he built to protect himself were always meant to be torn down, so that something better could be built in their place. The fragile peace that settles over Blackthorn Keep after the Council's approval of the new governance structure lasts exactly 4 days. 4 days of careful navigation, of Kael and Elra learning to work in tandem, of the court adjusting to a reality where power is no longer concentrated in a single iron fist, but distributed between two equally formidable wills. 4 days where the Dominion holds its breath, waiting to see if this unprecedented arrangement will hold or shatter under the weight of centuries of tradition that scream against it. On the 5th day, everything collapses. The messenger arrives at dawn, his horse lathered and trembling from a ride that clearly pushed both animal and rider beyond reasonable limits. Kael is in the training yard when Torin finds him, the older man's face ashen in a way that makes Kael's instincts flare with immediate alarm. The steward does not speak until they are alone in the armory, away from the guards who might carry whispers through the castle's stone corridors. "My lord, we have received word from the southern border. Countess Selwyn has not fled. She has assembled an army." Kael's blood turns cold. The words land with the force of a physical blow, reordering everything he thought he understood about Mira's endgame. He had anticipated exile, perhaps a quiet alliance with rival houses, a long game of economic warfare played from a safe distance. But open military confrontation requires resources, planning, and alliances that take months to cultivate, which means Mira has been preparing this move far longer than Victor's execution, far longer than Elira's arrival, far longer than any of them suspected. "How large?" Torin's voice is grim. "Initial reports estimate 3,000 men, a combination of her own house guards, mercenaries, and conscripts from the southern provinces. They are marching north under the banner of restoration." Kael's mind races through tactical calculations. 3,000 is not enough to storm Blackthorn Keep directly, not with Sir Edric's fortifications and the natural defensive advantages of the northern terrain, but it is more than enough to lay siege, to cut off supply lines, to starve the castle into submission over weeks or months. And if Mira has convinced other houses to support her cause, if she has positioned this as a campaign to rescue the Dominion from a duke who has lost his way, then neutrality becomes complicity, and every noble family will be forced to choose sides. What is her stated justification? Torin hands him a rolled parchment, the wax seal already broken. Kael unfurls it and reads, his jaw tightening with each line. The document is addressed to the noble houses of the Northern Dominion, a carefully crafted piece of propaganda that paints Kael as a tyrant who executed his most loyal advisor on fabricated charges, who elevated an outsider to power based on infatuation rather than merit, who has destabilized the realm through erratic decisions driven by emotional compromise. It calls for his removal and the establishment of a regency council that would govern until stability is restored. And it names Elra Voss as the figurehead of that council, suggesting she is either complicit in Kael's madness or a victim in need of rescue. It is masterful in its construction. Every accusation carries just enough truth to be plausible, twisted through a lens that transforms Kael's evolution into evidence of weakness. Mira has taken his greatest strength, his willingness to adapt and share power, and weaponized it into his most damning vulnerability. Kael crushes the parchment in his fist. Where is Elra? in the council chamber, reviewing resource allocations. She does not yet know. Kael's voice is steel. Summon her, and convene an emergency war council. Everyone. Gareth, Edric, every lord who remains in the castle. We meet in 1 hour. Torin nods and hurries away, leaving Kael alone in the armory surrounded by instruments of violence. He stares at the walls lined with swords, axes, shields, all the tools humanity has devised to settle disputes when words fail. He has spent years avoiding this moment, maintaining power through calculated displays of force that never quite escalated into open war. But Mira has forced his hand, and now he must make a choice that defines not just his rule, but his very identity. Does he respond with the ruthless efficiency that built his reputation? Does he crush this rebellion with such overwhelming force that no one ever dares challenge him again? Or does he hold to the principles he has only recently embraced, the belief that power shared is power multiplied, that vulnerability is not weakness, but the foundation of true strength? The problem is that principles do not stop armies. Ideals do not deflect blades. And philosophy, however enlightened, offers cold comfort to those who bleed out on battlefields. Kael leaves the armory and walks through corridors that suddenly feel like a tomb. Every stone, every tapestry, every window overlooking the valley below represents something he built through sheer force of will. This castle, this dominion, this carefully constructed edifice of control, all of it exists because he refused to yield, refused to compromise, refused to accept that anyone else's vision mattered more than his own. And now that approach, that fundamental philosophy, is being challenged by someone who learned from him, who studied his methods, and found the fracture points he never anticipated. Because Kael never expected someone to use his own evolution against him. He reaches the council chamber to find Elra already there, bent over maps and ledgers, her focus absolute. She looks up when he enters, and the expression on his face makes her straighten immediately. What happened? Kael does not soften the blow. Mira Selwyn has raised an army, 3,000 strong. They are marching on Blackthorn under the banner of restoration. She is calling for my removal and your installation as leader of a regency council. The color drains from Elra's face. She grips the edge of the table, her knuckles white. That is insane. I would never... I know. Kael's voice is rough. But what you would or would not do is irrelevant. She has positioned you as either conspirator or victim, and either narrative serves her purpose. If you support me, you are complicit in tyranny. If you oppose me, you validate her claims. Elra's breathing becomes shallow, rapid. This is a trap. No matter what we do, we lose. Kael finishes her thought with brutal honesty. Unless we redefine the conflict entirely. Elra meets his gaze, searching for answers he is not sure he has. How? Kael crosses to the map table, staring down at the territorial boundaries, the supply routes, the defensive positions. By refusing to play the game she has designed, Mira expects me to respond as I always have. Overwhelming force, ruthless efficiency. She expects me to prove her accusations correct by behaving exactly as she claims I behave. So we do the opposite. Elra's voice is strained. You want to negotiate? Kael, she is marching with 3,000 soldiers. This is not a negotiation. This is war. Kael's gaze is hard. Then we fight a war she does not expect. Not just with soldiers and strategy, but with truth. We expose her conspiracy, her manipulations, her calculated betrayals. We make this about her ambition, not my fitness to rule. Elra shakes her head. The noble houses will not care about truth when an army is at their doorstep. They will care about survival, and survival means choosing the side most likely to win. Then we make sure we are that side. Kael's tone is absolute, but we do it without becoming the tyrant she claims I am. The door opens, and the council begins to file in. Lord Gareth enters first, his face grave, followed by Sir Edric, whose expression is carved from granite. The remaining nobles, those who did not flee with Isolda or conspire with Mira, take their seats in tense silence. When everyone is assembled, Kael does not waste time with preambles. Countess Selwyn has raised an army of 3,000 men and is marching north. Her stated goal is my removal and the establishment of a regency council. This is an act of open rebellion, and it will be met with appropriate force. Sir Edric leans forward, his voice steady. What are your orders, my lord? Kael looks to Elra, a silent acknowledgement that this decision is not his alone. She nods, understanding the gesture for what it is. When Kael speaks again, his voice carries the weight of shared authority. We mobilize every available soldier, fortify the southern approaches, cut off supply lines that might aid Selwyn's forces. But we do not initiate offensive action. Not yet. Lord Gareth's eyebrows rise. My lord, waiting allows her to consolidate position. We should strike while she is still on the march. Kael's gaze is unwavering. If we strike first, we validate her narrative. She becomes the defender, and we become the aggressors. Instead, we force her to commit to siege. And while she is laying siege, we expose the full extent of her conspiracy to every noble house in the realm. Elra steps forward, her voice clear despite the tension radiating through her frame. We have documented evidence of her communications, her financial transactions, her manipulation of border security. We will disseminate that evidence to every house, every merchant guild, every influential voice in the Dominion. Let them see who truly destabilized this realm. Lord Thale, who has been silent until now, speaks hesitantly. And if they do not care, if they view this as a power struggle where the truth is less important than the outcome, then we remind them what happens to those who support rebellion. Kael's voice drops to something cold and lethal. Any house that aids Selwyn will share her fate. Their assets will be seized, their titles revoked, their families exiled. I have demonstrated mercy in the past. I will not do so again. The nobles exchange glances, fear and calculation warring on their faces. Sir Edric nods slowly, approval evident in his scarred features. Lord Gareth looks thoughtful, already working through the economic implications. Lord Thale appears pale but determined, clearly understanding that neutrality is no longer an option. The meeting continues for 2 hours, cycling through logistics and contingencies. Messengers are dispatched to loyal houses, calling them to Blackthorn's defense. Supply chains are secured. Defensive positions are reinforced. And through it all, Kael and Elra work in seamless coordination, their different perspectives creating a strategy that is stronger than either could have designed alone. When the council finally adjourns, Kael and Elra remain in the chamber. The weight of what is coming settles over them like a shroud. Elra speaks first, her voice barely above a whisper. 3,000 soldiers, Kael. Even with fortifications, even with strategy, people will die. Our people. Because of choices we made. Kael's expression is grim. People die because of choices others make. Mira chose this path. We are simply responding to it. That does not absolve us of responsibility. Kael turns to face her fully. No, it does not. But responsibility means making the hard choices anyway. It means accepting that leadership requires sacrifice. And sometimes, that sacrifice is measured in blood. Elra's eyes glisten. I am not sure I am strong enough for this. Kael crosses to her, his movements deliberate. He reaches out and takes her hands, his grip firm and grounding. You are the strongest person I know, not because you do not doubt, but because you act despite your doubts. That is courage, Elra. And courage is the only thing that will see us through what is coming. Elra's voice breaks. What if we fail? What if everything we have built collapses? Then we fail together. Kael's tone is absolute. But we do not fail because we gave up. We do not fail because we compromised our principles. If we fall standing, not kneeling. The words hang in the air between them, a vow and a promise, and a declaration of something neither has been willing to name until now. Elra leans forward, resting her forehead against his, and they stand like that in the empty council chamber, two people bound by choice and circumstance, facing an impossible situation with nothing but each other and the fragile hope that what they have built is strong enough to withstand the storm. The next 72 hours transform Blackthorn Keep into a fortress preparing for siege. Sir Edric drills the soldiers relentlessly, his commands echoing through the courtyard as men practice formations and defensive maneuvers. The forges run day and night, producing arrows, repairing armor, sharpening blades. Merchants and craftsmen who live in the valley surrounding the castle are brought inside the walls, along with their families and whatever supplies they can carry. The castle swells with refugees, the corridors packed with frightened civilians who look to Kael and Elra for reassurance that safety is possible. Kael walks among them, offering words of confidence he is not entirely sure he feels. But leadership, he has learned, is often performance. The people need to believe their duke is unshaken, that victory is assured, that the walls around them are impenetrable. So he plays the role, projecting strength and certainty, even as his mind races through scenarios and contingencies, calculating odds and preparing for outcomes he refuses to speak aloud. Elra takes a different approach. She moves through the refugee camps that have sprung up in the inner courtyard, listening to concerns, addressing needs, organizing the distribution of resources. Where Kael represents strength through authority, Elra represents strength through compassion. Together, they create a balance that keeps panic from spiraling into chaos. On the third night, scouts return with confirmation that Mira's army has reached the southern ridge. They're setting up camp, preparing siege engines, establishing supply lines. The siege will begin at dawn. Kael receives the report in the war room, surrounded by maps marked with defensive positions and troop deployments. Sir Edric stands beside him, arms crossed, his expression thoughtful. They will test the southern wall first. Edric's voice is steady, professional. It is the most obvious approach, and Selwyn will want to gauge our defensive capabilities before committing to a prolonged siege. Kael nods. Let them test. The southern wall has been reinforced. It will hold. Edric's gaze is searching. And when it holds? What then? Then we wait. Force her to commit resources, drain her supplies, make this siege cost her more than she anticipated. Edric's jaw tightens. My lord, waiting gives her time to gather additional support. If other houses join her cause, they will not. Kael's tone is confident, though the confidence is built on hope as much as strategy. We have exposed her conspiracy. The evidence has been disseminated. Any house that joins her now does so with full knowledge that they are supporting a traitor. Edric does not look convinced, but he nods. As you say, my lord. When Edric leaves, Kael remains in the war room, staring at the maps. The truth is that he does not know if the noble houses will care about evidence of conspiracy. Power is often more persuasive than truth, and Mira's army represents tangible power in a way that documents and testimony do not. But Kael has made his choice. He is committed to fighting this war without becoming the tyrant Mira accuses him of being. And if that commitment costs him everything, then at least he will fall knowing he did not compromise the principles he only recently learned to value. The door opens and Elra enters, her face drawn with exhaustion. She crosses to the table, standing beside him in silence for a long moment. Finally, she speaks. The people are scared. They should be. Kael's voice is quiet. Fear is rational when an army is at your doorstep. They are also looking to us, to you. They need to believe this is survivable. Kael turns to face her. Is it? Elra's expression is raw, honest. I do not know. But I know that if we give up, if we surrender to fear, then we have already lost. So we keep fighting, we keep believing, even when it seems impossible. Kael reaches out and cups her face in his hands, a gesture that has become familiar in the privacy of moments when no one else is watching. You have changed me, Elra, in ways I did not think possible. Elra's eyes fill with tears. You have changed me too. Kael's voice drops to something barely audible. If we do not survive this, we will survive. Elra's interruption is fierce. We have to. Kael wants to believe her, wants to hold on to the certainty in her voice and let it anchor him against the tide of doubt threatening to pull him under. But he has spent too many years calculating odds, assessing risks, understanding that wanting something does not make it true. 3,000 soldiers against fortifications designed to withstand siege. Supplies that will last months if rationed carefully. Defensive advantages that favor the besieged. On paper, Blackthorn can hold. But war is not fought on paper. It is fought in mud and blood and desperation, and those variables do not care about calculations. Still, he does not voice these doubts, because Elra is right. Giving voice to fear is the first step towards surrender. So instead he pulls her close, holding her in the silence of the war room, surrounded by maps of a dominion that may soon be torn apart by forces they cannot fully control. Dawn breaks cold and clear. Kael stands on the southern battlements, watching as Mira's army moves into position. From this distance, they look like insects, tiny figures swarming across the valley floor. But Kael knows what those figures represent. 3,000 lives, 3,000 men who have made the choice to follow Mira Selwyn into rebellion. Some are mercenaries motivated by coin. Others are conscripts who had no real choice. and some are true believers, convinced that they are fighting to restore order to a dominion that has lost its way. Kael wonders how many of them will be alive when this is over. Sir Edric joins him on the battlements, his armor glinting in the early morning light. They are in range for siege engines, my lord. We should move back from the wall. Kael does not move. Let them see me. Let them know I am not hiding. Edric's expression tightens, but he does not argue. Below, the army begins to move. Siege towers are rolled forward, massive wooden structures covered in wet hides to resist fire. Catapults are positioned, their crews loading stones the size of a man's torso. And at the center of the formation, on a raised platform that allows her to oversee the entire operation, stands Countess Mira Selwyn. Even from this distance, Kael can see her clearly. She wears armor, practical rather than ornamental, and her dark hair is pulled back in a severe braid. She looks every inch the general, a commander who has planned this campaign with the same precision she once applied to managing mining operations. And when her gaze sweeps across the battlements and locks with Kael's, he sees no hesitation, no doubt, only cold determination. She raises her hand, and the army falls silent. Her voice carries across the valley, amplified by the terrain and the stillness of the morning air. Duke Kael Viermont, I offer you one chance to surrender, abdicate your position, turn over authority to a regency council. Do this, and no more blood will be spilled. Refuse, and we will take Blackthorn by force. Kael's response is immediate, his voice ringing out with equal clarity. Countess Selwyn, you stand in open rebellion against legitimate authority. Disperse your forces and submit to justice, and I will show mercy. Continue this assault, and you will be destroyed. Mira's smile is visible even at this distance. Then we understand each other. She lowers her hand, and the siege engines fire. The first volley of stones crashes into the southern wall with thunderous impact. The fortifications hold, the stone absorbing the blows, but the sound is deafening. Dust and debris rain down, and the soldiers on the battlements duck instinctively. Kael remains standing, his posture rigid, refusing to show any sign of fear. The siege has begun. Over the next week, the pattern becomes grinding routine. Mira's forces launch coordinated assaults on the southern wall, testing defenses, probing for weaknesses. Each attack is repelled, but not without cost. Soldiers fall to arrows and stones. Supplies are depleted faster than anticipated. And the psychological toll of constant bombardment wears on everyone, fraying nerves and eroding morale. Kael and Elra work tirelessly to maintain order within the castle. Kael coordinates defensive strategies with Edric, positioning archers and managing rotations to keep soldiers fresh. Elra oversees the civilian population, ensuring that food is distributed fairly, that injuries are treated, that panic does not spiral into chaos. They sleep in shifts, grabbing a few hours when exhaustion becomes overwhelming, then returning to their duties with the grim determination of people who understand that surrender is not an option. On the 8th day, a messenger arrives from the western provinces. Lord Gareth brings the news to Kael personally, his expression grave. My lord, we have received word from House Brennan and House Locke. They are remaining neutral in this conflict. They will not support Selwyn, but neither will they send aid to Blackthorn. Kael's jaw tightens. Neutrality is cowardice dressed as pragmatism. Perhaps, but it also means they are not actively opposing us. That is something. It is not enough. Kael's voice is hard. We need reinforcements. Without additional forces, this siege will grind us down over months. Lord Gareth hesitates, then speaks carefully. My lord, there may be another option. If we were to negotiate with Selwyn, reach some form of compromise, no. Kael's response is immediate, absolute. Compromise is surrender dressed in diplomatic language. We do not negotiate with traitors. Even if negotiation saves lives, Kael's gaze is cold. Negotiation sends a message that rebellion is viable. That authority can be challenged and rewarded. I will not set that precedent. Set that. Gareth falls silent, clearly disagreeing but unwilling to push further. When he leaves, Kael remains alone in the war room, staring at reports that detail dwindling supplies and rising casualties. The numbers are stark, unforgiving. Blackthorn can hold for another month, perhaps 6 weeks if rationing becomes severe. But beyond that, the mathematics become untenable. Kael has gambled everything on the belief that Mira's resources will run out first, that her army will fracture under the strain of prolonged siege, that the noble houses will eventually recognize her cause as illegitimate and withdraw support. But those are assumptions, not certainties. And if he is wrong, if Mira's resolve proves stronger than his calculations anticipated, then everything he has built will collapse. Not just his rule, not just his dominion, but the fragile partnership he has formed with Elra, the tentative steps toward a governance model that values trust over tyranny. All of it will be swept away in the tide of military defeat. That night, Kael finds Elra on the eastern balcony, the place where this transformation began. She stares out over the valley, her expression distant, lost in thought. He approaches quietly, and when she senses his presence, she does not turn. How much longer can we hold? Kael considers lying, offering reassurance that is not supported by facts, but they are past the point where lies serve any purpose. 4 weeks, perhaps 5. And then we make a choice. Surrender or die fighting. Elra finally turns to face him, and the anguish in her eyes cuts deeper than any blade. This is my fault. If I had never come here, if you had turned me away, then I would still be the man I was before, isolated, alone, convinced that control was the same as strength. Kael steps closer, his voice rough with emotion he no longer tries to hide. You gave me something I did not know I needed, Elra. You gave me a reason to evolve, and I will not regret that, not even if it costs me everything. Elra's tears spill over and she reaches for him. He pulls her close, holding her as she breaks, her shoulders shaking with the weight of everything they are facing. And in that moment, surrounded by stone walls that may soon become their tomb, Kael understands something fundamental about the nature of power. True power is not the ability to control outcomes. It is the courage to face them, whatever they may be, with someone you trust standing beside you. He has spent his entire life trying to eliminate variables, to create certainty through discipline and force of will. But certainty is an illusion. The only real constant is choice. And the choice to stand with Elra, to fight for a vision of leadership that values partnership over domination, that is the most powerful decision he has ever made, even if it destroys him. They stand together on the balcony as night falls, 2 figures silhouetted against the darkness. Behind them, the castle is a hive of activity, soldiers preparing for another day of siege, civilians huddling together for warmth and comfort. Ahead of them, beyond the walls, Mira's army waits with the patience of predators who know their prey is trapped. And between those two realities, Kael and Elra hold on to each other and the fragile belief that what they have built is worth defending, no matter the cost. On the 15th day of the siege, everything changes. Kael is in the war room when Sir Edric bursts through the door, his expression more animated than Kael has ever seen. My lord, scouts report movement from the north, an army approaching Blackthorn. Kael's blood runs cold. If reinforcements have arrived for Mira, if other houses have joined her cause, then the siege becomes unwinnable. How many? Edric's expression shifts into something that might be hope. 2,000. Flying the banner of House Draymore. The name hits Kael like a physical blow. Lord Draymore, the southern lord whose marriage alliance Kael rejected, whose withdrawal of support seemed to confirm his isolation. And now he is marching on Blackthorn with 2,000 soldiers. The question is whose side he is on. Kael moves to the window, staring out at the northern approach. In the distance, he can see the glint of armor, the movement of a disciplined force marching in formation. The banner is unmistakable, the crimson and gold of House Draymore snapping in the wind. Send riders. I want to know his intentions before he reaches the castle. Edric nods and disappears. Kael remains at the window, his mind racing through possibilities. Draymore could be coming to support Mira, adding his forces to hers and creating an overwhelming numerical advantage. Or he could be coming as neutral arbiter, seeking to broker peace. Or impossibly, he could be coming to Kael's aid. But why? Kael rejected the alliance, insulted Draymore's pride by refusing the marriage arrangement. There is no logical reason for the Lord to support him now, unless there is something Kael does not yet understand. An hour later, the answer arrives in the form of a messenger riding under a white flag of truce. Kael receives him in the great hall, Elra at his side, Sir Edric standing ready nearby. The messenger is young, nervous, clearly aware of the tension crackling through the air. My Lord Duke, I bring word from Lord Draymore. He requests parley. He will meet with you and Lady Voss at the northern gate within the hour. Kael's expression remains neutral. Tell Lord Draymore his request is granted. When the messenger departs, Elra turns to Kael. This could be a trap. I know, but we cannot afford to refuse. If there is any chance he is here to help, then we take that chance. Elra's voice is steady, despite the fear in her eyes. Together. Together. Kael echoes the word that has become their foundation. They walk to the northern gate side by side, flanked by Edric and a contingent of guards. The gate is open just wide enough to allow them through, and they step out into the no-man's land between the castle walls and Draymore's encamped forces. Lord Draymore waits on horseback, his armor immaculate, his posture regal. He is a man in his 50s, weathered by years of political maneuvering, his eyes sharp and assessing. When Kael and Elra approach, he dismounts, gesturing for his own guards to remain back. Duke Viramont, Lady Voss. Draymore's voice is measured, giving nothing away. Lord Draymore. Kael's tone is equally neutral. You requested parley. I did. Draymore's gaze shifts between them, calculating. I have come to offer my support. My forces will join yours in defending Blackthorn against Countess Selwyn's rebellion. The words should bring relief, but Kael's instincts scream caution. Why? Draymore's expression remains impassive. Because Selwyn's accusations against you are baseless. I have reviewed the evidence you disseminated. The conspiracy is real, her betrayal undeniable, and I will not allow a traitor to destabilize the realm through manufactured outrage. Kael studies him, searching for deception. Your support is unexpected. I rejected your alliance proposal. You did. Draymore's lips curve into something that might be a smile, and that rejection, while personally insulting, was strategically sound. You refused to be coerced into an arrangement based on political necessity rather than genuine partnership. I respect that. And I respect the governance model you have implemented with Lady Voss. It demonstrates adaptability and strength. Elra speaks for the first time, her voice cautious. What do you want in return for your support? Draymore's gaze shifts to her. A fair question. In return, I want a formal trade agreement. Favorable terms, but not exploitative. And I want assurance that when this conflict is resolved, the Northern Dominion will engage with the Southern provinces as partners, not subjects. Kael considers the proposal. It is reasonable, perhaps too reasonable, but he does not have the luxury of suspicion. 2,000 soldiers could turn the siege into a winnable conflict, could give Blackthorn the numerical advantage needed to not just survive but to actively break Mira's forces. Agreed. But understand this, Draymore. If you betray us, if this is some elaborate ploy, I will ensure you suffer consequences that make Mira's fate look merciful. Draymore's smile widens. I would expect nothing less, Duke Viramont. They clasp hands, sealing the agreement, and as they do, Kael feels something shift. Not certainty, not security, but possibility. The siege is no longer a slow march toward inevitable defeat. It has become a conflict with multiple outcomes, some of which might even include victory. Draymore's forces integrate with Blackthorn's defenses over the next 2 days. The Northern Lord proves true to his word, positioning his soldiers to reinforce weak points, coordinating with Edric on strategy, providing supplies that ease the strain on Blackthorn's dwindling resources. The mood within the castle shifts from grim endurance to cautious hope. But Mira is not blind to the change. On the 18th day, her forces launch the most aggressive assault yet. Siege towers roll forward under cover of catapult fire. Ladders are thrown against the walls. Soldiers swarm up, determined to breach the defenses before Draymore's reinforcements can be fully integrated. The battle is brutal, chaotic. Kael fights alongside his soldiers, his sword cutting through mercenaries who make it over the wall. Blood slicks the stone, making footing treacherous. The air fills with screams and the clash of metal, the stench of sweat and fear and death overwhelming. Elra is there too, not hiding in the safety of the inner keep but coordinating archers, organizing defensive positions, proving that her authority is not ceremonial but earned through action. Kael catches glimpses of her through the chaos, her face streaked with dirt and blood, her expression fierce and unyielding. And in those glimpses, Kael understands something profound. This woman, who arrived at his castle broken and desperate, who he almost dismissed as insignificant, has become the strongest ally he has ever known, not because she defers to him, but because she stands beside him as an equal. The assault lasts 4 hours. When Mira's forces finally retreat, leaving bodies piled at the base of the wall, Blackthorn still stands. Battered, bloodied, but unbroken. Kael surveys the aftermath from the battlements, his armor dented and stained. Beside him, Elra sways with exhaustion, but her eyes remain sharp. How many did we lose? Edric's voice is grim as he approaches. 37 dead, twice that wounded. But the wall held. 37 lives. 37 families who will grieve. Kael feels the weight of each death, the responsibility that comes with command. But he does not have the luxury of mourning. Not yet. What about Selwyn's forces? Edric's expression hardens. Estimates put their casualties at over 200. She cannot sustain losses at that rate. Then we have her. Kael's voice is cold. One more assault like that, and her army breaks. Or she retreats. Elra's tone is thoughtful, cuts her losses and flees beyond our reach. Kael shakes his head. She has committed too much, invested too many resources. Retreat would destroy her credibility with any remaining allies. No, she will make one final push, everything she has, and we need to be ready. That night, as exhausted soldiers sleep where they can and healers tend to the wounded, Kael stands in the war room making final preparations. Draymore joins him, the two men studying maps in tense silence. She will come at dawn. Draymore's voice is certain, full assault, no holding back. Kael nods. Then we meet her with everything we have. Draymore's gaze is searching. You have changed, Duke Viramont, from the man I met months ago. Kael does not look up from the maps. War changes everyone. It is not the war. Draymore's tone is thoughtful. It is her. Lady Voss, she has made you human again. Kael's jaw tightens. I was always human. Were you? Draymore's challenge is quiet but pointed. Or were you simply a very efficient machine? The words strike deeper than Kael wants to admit, because there is truth in them. He was a machine, cold and calculating, measuring everything in terms of strategic advantage. Elra did not just change his tactics, she changed his fundamental understanding of what power means. She made me better. Kael's admission is quiet. Draymore nods. Then let us make sure she survives to continue doing so. As predicted, Mira launches her final assault at dawn. But this time, she does not hold anything back. Every soldier, every siege engine, every resource she has accumulated is thrown against Blackthorn's walls in a desperate gambit to break through before her forces completely fracture. The battle is apocalyptic in its intensity. The air becomes thick with smoke and ash. Blood runs in rivers down the stone. And through it all, Kael fights with a ferocity born not of rage, but of purpose. He is not fighting to maintain power. He is fighting to protect something far more valuable, a vision of leadership built on trust, a partnership that redefines what strength means, and a woman who saw through his walls and refused to let him hide behind them. Elra is everywhere, her presence a rallying point for defenders who might otherwise break. When a section of wall begins to falter, she is there, directing reinforcements. When supplies run low, she coordinates redistribution. And when soldiers waver, seeing the overwhelming force arrayed against them, she stands visible on the battlements, refusing to retreat, refusing to hide, embodying the courage that transforms desperation into determination. The battle rages for 6 hours, 6 hours of unrelenting violence, of lines holding and breaking and reforming, of ground gained and lost and fought over again. Kael loses track of how many men he kills, his sword becoming an extension of his will, cutting down anyone who threatens what he is protecting. And then, suddenly, impossibly, the assault falters. Mira's forces begin to pull back, not in organized retreat, but in chaotic rout. Soldiers throw down weapons and run. Officers shout orders that go unheeded. The carefully constructed army dissolves into a panicked mob fleeing from walls they can no longer breach. Kael stands on the battlements, chest heaving, watching the disintegration with grim satisfaction. Beside him, Elra sways, blood running from a gash on her temple. He reaches for her, steadying her, and she leans into him, exhaustion finally claiming her. Is it over? Kael's gaze sweeps the battlefield, searching for Mira among the fleeing soldiers. He finds her near the command platform, still mounted, trying desperately to rally her forces. But it is futile. The army has broken. The siege is ended. It is over. Kael's voice is rough. We won. But even as he speaks the words, movement catches his eye. A figure detaching from Mira's position, riding hard toward the north. Not fleeing, advancing with purpose toward a destination Kael cannot yet see. And then he understands. Mira has one final move, one last desperate gambit. If she cannot take Blackthorn through siege, she will strike at its heart directly. She is coming for them, not with an army, but as an assassin. Kael's blood turns to ice as he watches her approach the northern gate. The gate left vulnerable during the chaos of battle. The gate where civilians are sheltering, where Elra was coordinating refugee support mere hours ago. No! The word tears from his throat as he moves, sprinting toward the stairs, Edric and Draymore's soldiers scrambling to follow. But Kael knows with sick certainty that he will not reach the gate in time. Mira Selwyn is coming, and everything he has fought to protect hangs in the balance of the next 60 seconds. Kael's boots hammer against stone as he races through the castle corridors, his mind calculating trajectories and timelines with the cold precision that has defined his entire existence. 60 seconds, maybe less. That is all the time standing between Mira Selwyn and the northern gate, between a desperate assassin and the civilians sheltering behind walls they believe are impregnable. Every second he wastes is a second closer to catastrophe, and the knowledge drives him forward with a ferocity that borders on madness. Behind him, Sir Edric's voice barks orders, soldiers scrambling to respond. But Kael does not wait for them. Cannot wait. Because leadership is not always about strategy and calculated risk. Sometimes it is simply about being willing to stand between danger and those who cannot protect themselves. And if that means facing Mira alone, weaponless and exhausted from hours of battle, then that is a price Kael will pay without hesitation. He bursts through a side entrance and into the courtyard just as Mira's horse thunders through the northern gate. The gate guards lie crumpled on the ground, throats cut with brutal efficiency. Mira herself is a vision of controlled fury, her armor dented and blood-stained, her sword drawn and gleaming red in the morning light. She has abandoned the pretense of general or noble. Now she is simply a killer, stripped down to the essential truth of what this conflict has always been about. Raw, uncompromising will to power. Her gaze sweeps the courtyard and locks onto Kael. For a moment, neither moves. They stand perhaps 30 feet apart. Two people who once sat at the same council table, who once negotiated trade agreements and resource allocations with the civility that nobility demands. All that is gone now, burned away in the fires of siege and betrayal, leaving only the stark reality of survival. Mira dismounts in a fluid motion, her movements economical despite obvious exhaustion. You should have negotiated, Kael. You should have seen that sharing power was the only rational outcome. But your pride, your pathological need for control, it has destroyed everything. Kael's hand moves to the sword at his hip, drawing it slowly. You mistake evolution for weakness, Mira. The same mistake Victor made. The same mistake that led you here, defeated and desperate. Mira's laugh is harsh, brittle. Defeated? I still draw breath. I still hold a blade. And I still have one move left that changes everything. She lunges forward with shocking speed for someone who has been commanding a siege for 18 days. Her blade cuts through the space where Kael stood a heartbeat before, and only instinct born of years of training saves him from being gutted like a fish. He parries, the impact reverberating up his arm, and they separate, circling each other like wolves testing for weakness. This is not a duel fought with the ceremonial precision of noble combat. This is brutal, desperate, two exhausted people fighting with the knowledge that only one will walk away. Mira attacks with the fury of someone who has gambled everything and lost, who sees in Kael's continued existence the complete annihilation of her ambitions. Kael defends with the grim determination of someone protecting not just his life, but a vision of leadership that Mira represents the antithesis of. Their blades meet again and again, sparks flying as steel grinds against steel. Mira is skilled, perhaps more skilled than Kael anticipated. She has clearly spent years training in ways that her public persona as a mine administrator never suggested. But skill is not the same as necessity, and Kael fights with the knowledge that behind him, somewhere in the castle, Elra is bleeding from a head wound sustained defending the very walls Mira tried to breach. That image, that singular focus on protecting what matters, gives Kael an edge that pure technique cannot match. He presses forward, forcing Mira back step by step, his attacks becoming more aggressive as her defense begins to fracture. She is tiring, her movements losing their earlier precision, and Kael can see the moment when she realizes she cannot win this fight through strength alone. So she changes tactics. In a move born of pure desperation, Mira feints high, then drops low, her blade slicing across Kael's thigh. Pain explodes through his leg, hot and immediate, and he staggers. Mira uses the opening to dart past him, running toward the inner keep where refugees have gathered, where the most vulnerable are sheltering. Kael's mind registers what she intends a fraction of a second before she acts. If she cannot kill him, she will slaughter those he has sworn to protect. She will create such carnage, such horror, that even victory will taste like ash. It is the final move of someone who understands that if she cannot have power, she will at least ensure that no one else finds peace in possessing it. Kael launches himself forward despite the agony in his leg, his hand closing around Mira's ankle mid-stride. She crashes to the ground, and they grapple in the dirt, both blades lost in the fall. It becomes something primal, fists and elbows in raw desperation. Mira claws at his face, her fingernails drawing blood. Kael drives his knee into her ribs, feeling something crack beneath the impact. They separate, gasping, and scramble for weapons. Kael reaches his sword first, his fingers closing around the hilt just as Mira's blade comes down. He rolls, the edge missing him by inches, and comes up swinging. His blade catches Mira across the shoulder, cutting deep through armor and flesh. She screams, a sound of pure rage and pain, and swings wildly. Kael blocks, then strikes again, his sword finding her side. Mira drops to her knees, blood pouring from multiple wounds. Her sword falls from nerveless fingers, clattering against stone. She looks up at Kael, and in her eyes he sees not fear but a terrible, bitter understanding. She is lost, completely, irrevocably. And there is no negotiation that will save her now. Kael stands over her, his sword raised for the killing blow. This is the moment that defines everything. The choice between the ruthless efficiency that built his reputation and the principles he has only recently learned to value. Mira is defeated, disarmed, bleeding out. Executing her now would be pragmatic, eliminating a threat that could resurface if given the chance. It would send a message to anyone else who might consider rebellion. It would be the decision that Duke Kael Viramont, master of control, would have made without hesitation 6 months ago. But 6 months ago, Kael had not met Elra Voss. 6 months ago, he had not learned that true strength sometimes means choosing mercy when vengeance would be easier. Kael lowers his sword. You are finished, Mira. Your army is broken, your conspiracy exposed, your allies have abandoned you. I could kill you now, and no one would question it. But I am not the tyrant you claimed I was. Mira's laugh is wet, bubbling with blood. Then you are a fool. Because mercy is weakness, and weakness will destroy you. Kael's voice is quiet, but absolute. You are wrong. Mercy is the hardest choice I have ever made, and making hard choices is what separates leaders from tyrants. He turns to find Sir Edric and a squad of guards finally arriving, weapons drawn and ready. Edric's gaze sweeps the scene, taking in the wounded Mira, the blood covering Kael, the tension still crackling in the air. My lord, we heard fighting. Are you... I am fine. Kael's voice is strained but controlled. Countess Selwyn is under arrest. Take her to the dungeons. She will stand trial for treason. Edric nods curtly, gesturing to the guards who move forward to seize Mira. She does not resist, her body too damaged to fight, her spirit finally broken. As they drag her away, she looks back at Kael one final time. This is not over. The words are barely a whisper. The court will never accept your weakness. They will see this mercy as proof that you have lost your edge, and they will devour you for it. Then they will learn the same lesson you just did. Kael's response is cold. That underestimating me is fatal. Mira is carried away, leaving Kael alone in the courtyard. The adrenaline that sustained him through the fight begins to drain, and the pain in his leg becomes overwhelming. He sways, catching himself against a nearby wall, his vision swimming. Around him, the castle slowly comes back to life as word spreads that the siege is truly ended, that Mira has been captured, that survival is no longer a question but a reality. Kael forces himself to straighten, to walk despite the agony radiating from his wounded leg. Because he is still the Duke, still responsible, still required to be the symbol of strength even when everything inside him wants to collapse. He makes it 3 steps before his leg gives out and he falls to one knee, blood pooling beneath him. Then Elra is there, appearing from nowhere with two healers in tow. Her face is pale, the gash on her temple bandaged but still seeping blood through the wrapping. She drops to her knees beside him, her hands immediately moving to assess his wounds. "You idiot!" Her voice breaks. "You absolute idiot! You could have been killed." Kael's smile is weak but genuine. So could you. And yet, here we both are. The healers work quickly, binding his leg to stop the bleeding. The pain is extraordinary, white-hot, and all-consuming, but Kael forces himself to remain conscious, to remain present. Because this moment, this aftermath of violence and survival, is when leadership matters most. Not in the grand gestures of battle, but in the quiet determination to stand back up when everything inside you screams to stay down. Elra's hand finds his, gripping tight enough that her knuckles turn white. "You chose mercy. I saw it from the battlements. You could have killed her, and you chose mercy." Kael meets her gaze, and in her eyes he sees something that makes every moment of pain worthwhile. Not just relief or gratitude, but recognition. She sees what that choice cost him, understands the internal battle it represented, and values it in ways that no strategic advantage could ever match. "I am trying to be better." His voice is hoarse. "To be the leader this dominion deserves. Not just the one it fears." Elra's tears spill over and she leans forward, pressing her forehead to his. "You are already that leader, Kael. You have been for longer than you realize." The healers finish their work, and with Elra's help, Kael stands. His leg protests violently, but he grits his teeth and forces himself upright. Around them, soldiers and civilians begin to gather, drawn by the spectacle of their duke, wounded but standing, their council leader bleeding but unbowed. Kael can see the questions in their faces, the uncertainty about what comes next. So he gives them what they need. Not platitudes or empty promises, but honest acknowledgement of what they have endured and what they have achieved together. The siege is ended. Countess Selwyn is captured. Her forces are scattered. We have survived not through individual strength, but through collective resilience. Through the willingness to stand together when standing alone would have been easier. His voice carries across the courtyard, reaching ears that strain to hear. Some of you doubted the new governance structure. Some questioned whether shared authority could withstand the pressures of war. I understand those doubts. I shared them. But what we have proven over these 18 days is that leadership does not require absolute control. It requires trust. And trust, once earned, is stronger than any fortress wall. He looks to Elra, who stands beside him with her hand still gripping his. Lady Voss and I have navigated this crisis together. Not because either of us was too weak to lead alone, but because we understood that two perspectives, two sets of skills, two voices in harmony create something more resilient than solitary command ever could. The crowd is silent, absorbing his words. Kael can see some faces hardening in disagreement, others softening in acceptance. He knows that not everyone will embrace this philosophy, that traditional power structures die hard, and there will always be those who see collaboration as weakness. But he also knows that he has proven something fundamental, that Blackthorn can survive under shared leadership, that mercy can coexist with strength, that vulnerability, when chosen deliberately, becomes a source of power rather than a liability. We will rebuild. We will heal. And we will move forward not by returning to old certainties, but by embracing the lessons this conflict has taught us. That community matters, that compassion is not incompatible with justice, and that the future belongs not to those who cling to absolute control, but to those brave enough to share it. The crowd begins to applaud, tentatively at first, then with growing enthusiasm. It is not the roar of adoration that greets conquering heroes, but something more grounded and genuine. It is the acknowledgement of people who have survived something terrible and are choosing to believe in the possibility of something better. Kael allows himself to be led inside by the healers, Elra walking beside him. The castle corridors that earlier echoed with the sounds of battle now fill with the quieter noises of recovery. Wounded being tended, families reuniting, the slow, painful process of returning to normalcy after trauma. In the healing ward, Kael finally allows himself to rest. The healers clean and stitch his wounds, their movements practiced and efficient. The pain is managed with herbal drafts that blur the edges of consciousness, and Kael drifts in and out of awareness. In his lucid moments, he is aware of Elra sitting beside him, her presence a constant anchor. At some point, Lord Draymore arrives, his expression grave but satisfied. Your strategy worked, Duke Viermont. Selwyn's remaining forces have surrendered. The southern provinces are sending envoys to discuss terms, and the noble houses that remain neutral are now falling over themselves to pledge renewed loyalty. Kael's voice is thick with exhaustion. Political opportunism dressed as renewed faith. Draymor's smile is thin. Perhaps. But pragmatism has its uses. The important thing is that the Dominion is stabilizing, and you have emerged with your authority not just intact, but arguably strengthened. At what cost? Kael's question is quiet. Draymor considers before answering. 37 defenders dead in the initial assaults, another 23 in the final battle, hundreds wounded, civilian casualties were minimal. Thanks to your defensive strategy, Selwyn's forces lost over 600, with another 1,000 deserting or captured. The numbers are stark, undeniable. Nearly 60 lives lost defending Blackthorn, 60 families shattered, 60 futures erased. Kael feels the weight of each one, the responsibility that comes with command. These are not abstract casualties. They are people who trusted him to lead them through crisis, and some of them paid for that trust with everything they had. Ensure their families are cared for, pensions, land grants, whatever they need. Kael's tone is absolute, and the wounded receive the best care available. No expense spared. Draymor nods. It will be done. And what of Selwyn? What judgment will you pass? Kael closes his eyes, exhaustion pulling at him. She will stand trial, public, transparent. The evidence will be presented, her co-conspirators identified, and justice will be served according to law, not personal vendetta. That is merciful, given her crimes. Kael's eyes open, fixing Draymor with a steady gaze. Mercy is not the absence of consequences. It is the presence of fairness. Mira will face justice, but it will be justice untainted by revenge. Draymor studies him for a long moment, then inclines his head. You have changed, Duke Viermont, in ways I did not think possible for someone with your history. We all change. The question is whether we change for the better. When Draymor leaves, Elra shifts closer, her hand finding Kael's again. You need to rest, truly rest, not the half-sleep where you are still calculating strategy. Kael's lips quirk into something almost resembling a smile. I do not know how to do that. Then learn. Elra's voice is gentle but firm. You have spent your entire life believing that vigilance equals safety, that rest equals vulnerability. But you cannot sustain that forever, Kael. Eventually, the body demands what the mind denies. She is right, and Kael knows it. The adrenaline that carried him through the siege has fully drained now, leaving behind only bone-deep exhaustion. His eyes drift closed despite his best efforts to stay alert, and this time he does not fight it. He allows himself to sink into darkness, trusting that Elra will watch over him in ways he has never trusted anyone before. When Kael wakes, it is to soft afternoon light filtering through the healing ward windows. His leg throbs with dull persistence, but the sharp agony has faded to manageable pain. He is aware of voices nearby, low and serious. He keeps his eyes closed, listening. The trial must be comprehensive. That is Torrin's voice, steady and pragmatic. Every piece of evidence documented. Every witness testimony recorded. We cannot allow any perception of summary judgment. Agreed. Lord Gareth's tone is thoughtful. The houses are watching closely. How we handle Selwyn sets precedent for how dissent is managed moving forward. What about Isolda? That is Elra, her voice carrying a weight that suggests she has been awake far longer than is healthy. She fled with Selwyn's blessing, but did not take up arms. Does she face the same charges? Torrin responds. By law, economic withdrawal is not treason. Isolda's defection was cowardly, but not criminal. However, her land should be subject to review. If she aided Selwyn's conspiracy through resource provision, that is actionable. Kael opens his eyes. Isolda will be offered a choice. Return and submit to full audit, or remain in exile with her assets frozen. If the audit reveals criminal conspiracy, she stands trial. If not, she retains her titles but loses the trust required to hold real power. The conversation stops abruptly as everyone turns to look at him. Elra is on her feet immediately, crossing to his bedside. You should be resting. I have rested enough. Kael's voice is rough but firm. How long was I unconscious? 16 hours. Elra's expression is a mixture of relief and exasperation. The healers said you pushed your body beyond reasonable limits. Reasonable limits are for people who have the luxury of choice. Kael attempts to sit up, and Elra helps him, propping pillows behind his back. What is the current situation? Torrin steps forward, holding several documents. The Dominion is stabilizing. Draymor's forces are beginning to withdraw, per your agreement. The Southern envoys arrive tomorrow to discuss terms, and we have received word from 3 houses pledging renewed loyalty and requesting audience to demonstrate their commitment. Kael's gaze is sharp despite his exhaustion. Let me guess. Houses that remained carefully neutral during the siege and now want to ensure they are positioned favorably in the aftermath. Lord Gareth has the grace to look uncomfortable. Political reality, my lord. We can use their support, even if the motivation is opportunistic. Kael nods slowly. Schedule the audiences, but make it clear that renewed loyalty requires more than words. They will be expected to contribute to rebuilding efforts. Resources. Labor. Whatever is needed to repair the damage this siege has caused. The meeting continues for another hour, covering logistics and political maneuvering. But Kael's mind is only partly engaged. The other part is focused on something more fundamental. A question that has been building since he lowered his sword rather than executing Mira in the courtyard. What does it mean to rule justly? Not efficiently, not pragmatically, but justly. It is a question Kael never asked himself before Elra arrived. Justice, in his previous worldview, was synonymous with order. Punish transgressors. Reward loyalty. Maintain stability through consistent application of consequences. It was mechanical, predictable, and utterly divorced from any consideration of compassion or context. But standing over Mira, seeing not just a traitor, but a person who made desperate choices born of ambition and fear, Kael understood that true justice requires something more complex. It requires acknowledging that people are not just variables in strategic equations. They are complicated, contradictory, capable of both nobility and depravity, often in the same breath. And governing such people demands more than rules. It demands wisdom. Wisdom Kael is only beginning to develop. When the advisors finally leave, when it is just Kael and Elra in the quiet of the healing ward, she sits on the edge of his bed and studies him with an intensity that makes him uncomfortable. What? You are different. Elra's voice is thoughtful. Not just from the man I met months ago. Different from the man who fought Mira this morning. Something has shifted. Kael considers denying it, deflecting with strategic discussion or pragmatic concerns. But he is committed to honesty with Elra, to allowing her to see beneath the armor he shows everyone else. So instead he tells her the truth. I'm afraid. The admission hangs in the air between them. Elra does not respond immediately, just waits for him to continue. I have spent my entire life believing that fear is weakness, that admitting vulnerability is the first step toward losing control. But I realized something when I stood over Mira. I was not afraid of her. I was afraid of myself. Afraid of what I would become if I gave in to the easiest choice. If I let vengeance masquerade as justice. Elra's hand finds his, her grip warm and grounding. That fear is healthy, Kael. It means you still have a conscience, that you have not become the machine you pretended to be. But what if that conscience makes me weak? What if the next crisis requires ruthlessness, and I hesitate because I am worried about being just rather than being effective? Elra's gaze is steady, unwavering. Then you surround yourself with people who will tell you when hesitation is dangerous. You build systems that check your impulses. You create accountability structures that prevent any single person, even you, from wielding unchecked power. That is what our partnership means, Kael. Not that you become soft, but that you become balanced. The concept of balance is foreign to someone who has spent years operating in extremes. Total control or total chaos. Absolute strength or unacceptable weakness. Kael never considered that there might be a sustainable middle ground, a way of leading that incorporated both discipline and compassion, both strength and vulnerability. But Elra is living proof that such balance is possible. She is compassionate without being weak, strong without being cruel. And together, they have created something that neither could have achieved alone. A governance structure that values multiple perspectives. A leadership model that distributes power rather than hoarding it. A dominion that survived crisis not through the iron will of a single ruler, but through the collective resilience of people who chose to stand together. It is radical, unprecedented. And it terrifies Kael precisely because he cannot control it the way he controlled his previous approach to leadership. Shared power means shared uncertainty. It means trusting that others will rise to meet challenges rather than failing in the face of them. But it also means that when he falls, and he will fall because everyone does eventually, there are others positioned to catch him, to carry forward the work, to ensure that the Dominion does not collapse simply because one person reached the limits of their capacity. That realization, that acceptance of his own mortality and fallibility, is perhaps the most profound transformation Kael has undergone. He is not invincible. He is not omniscient. He is simply a man trying to do better than he did yesterday, surrounded by people who challenge him to keep growing rather than calcifying into comfortable patterns. The trial of Mira Selwyn takes place 3 weeks later, after the most damaged sections of Blackthorn's walls have been repaired, and the immediate crisis of siege has faded into the realm of recent history. The Great Hall is packed with nobles, merchants, common citizens, all come to witness justice being served. Kael presides from the Duke's seat, with Elra seated in an equal position beside him, a physical manifestation of their shared authority. Mira's brought in under guard, her wounds healed enough that she can walk unassisted but still visible in the way she moves, stiff and pained. She looks older than her years, the siege and its aftermath aging her in ways that go beyond mere physical damage. When she meets Kael's gaze, there is no defiance left, just exhausted acceptance. The evidence is presented methodically. Letters detailing her conspiracy, financial records showing payments to mercenaries, testimony from couriers and officers who participated in her plot. Each piece builds an undeniable case of treason, of calculated betrayal spanning months and involving resources that could have fed the Dominion's poor or fortified its defenses. Mira does not contest the charges. She sits in silence as her crimes are catalogued, her expression empty. When given the opportunity to speak in her own defense, she rises slowly. I will not insult this court with excuses. I conspired against Duke Viramont because I believed him to be a tyrant whose rule threatened the stability of the realm. I was wrong, not about his methods, which were and remain ruthlessly efficient, but about his capacity for growth. I underestimated his willingness to evolve, and that miscalculation has cost me everything. She pauses, her gaze sweeping the assembled crowd. I offer no defense because there is none. I committed treason. I raised an army against my rightful lord, and I accept whatever judgment this court deems appropriate. Kael leans forward, his voice carrying across the hall. You claim you acted to protect the realm, yet your actions nearly destroyed it. Hundreds are dead because of choices you made. How do you reconcile that contradiction? Mira's smile is bitter. I do not. I lived long enough with certainty in my own righteousness that I stopped questioning my assumptions. I saw what I wanted to see and ignored evidence that contradicted my narrative. It is a failure I cannot undo, only acknowledge. The honesty is unexpected, and it shifts something in the atmosphere of the hall. This is not the defiant traitor refusing to accept accountability. This is someone genuinely grappling with the magnitude of their mistakes. Kael feels a flicker of something he did not anticipate. Not forgiveness, but understanding, because he recognizes in Mira's journey a distorted mirror of his own. Both of them so convinced of their righteousness that they stopped questioning whether their methods aligned with their stated goals. The difference is that Kael had someone willing to challenge him before his certainty became catastrophic. Mira did not. The court deliberates for 2 hours. When they return, the verdict is unanimous. Guilty of treason. The prescribed punishment is death, execution by beheading to be carried out within 3 days. It is the traditional response to rebellion, the clear message that challenging legitimate authority carries ultimate consequences. But when Torin reads the sentence, Kael raises his hand. The hall falls silent, every eye turning to him. Elra looks at him with surprise and something that might be concern. The verdict is just. The prescribed punishment is appropriate to the crime. However, I am invoking my authority as Duke to offer Countess Selwyn an alternative. Mira's head snaps up, her expression shifting from resigned acceptance to wary confusion. Kael continues, his voice measured and deliberate. You will be exiled. Permanently. You will be stripped of all titles, all property, all claims to authority within this dominion. You will be escorted to the southern border and released with enough resources to establish a modest life elsewhere. But you will never return. If you set foot in the northern territories again, the death sentence will be carried out immediately. No trial, no mercy. Do you understand these terms? Mira stares at him, disbelief warring with desperate hope on her face. Why? Because I have learned that justice is not always synonymous with maximum punishment. You committed treason, yes, but you did so believing you were acting in the realm's best interest, however misguided that belief. You have acknowledged your errors. You have accepted responsibility. And I choose to believe that a lifetime of exile, of living with the consequences of your choices, serves justice more completely than a swift death that allows you to become a martyr. The hall erupts in whispers, some approving, others scandalized. Lord Thale looks appalled. Lord Gareth appears thoughtful. Sir Edric's expression is carefully neutral, though Kyle suspects his captain has reservations. But it is Elira's face that matters most, and when Kyle glances at her, he sees tears streaming down her cheeks and something in her expression that might be pride. Mira's voice is hoarse when she finally speaks. I do not deserve this mercy. No, you do not. Kyle's tone is absolute, but mercy is not about deserving. It is about choosing to break cycles of violence when the opportunity presents itself. Take this chance, Mira. Build a different life. And never forget what your certainty cost you. Mira is led away, still seemingly unable to fully process what has just happened. The court adjourns in a buzz of conversation, nobles and commoners alike debating the wisdom of Kyle's decision. Some see it as weak, a dangerous precedent that suggests rebellion can be survived with minimal consequences. Others see it as enlightened, a ruler secure enough in his authority that he can show mercy without fear of undermining his position. Kale does not know which interpretation will ultimately prevail. He only knows that he made the choice that aligned with the principles he is trying to embody. And for the first time in his life, that alignment feels more important than strategic advantage. In the weeks that follow, the Dominion begins the slow process of recovery. Blackthorn's walls are fully repaired, stronger than before. Trade routes are reestablished. The houses that pledged renewed loyalty are held to their commitments, their resources contributing to rebuilding efforts that benefit the entire realm. Lord Draymore's alliance is formalized through treaties that establish fair trade terms and mutual defense agreements, creating a partnership based on respect rather than coercion. And through it all, Kyle and Elra continue to navigate the complexities of shared leadership. They disagree frequently, their different perspectives creating friction that sometimes sparks into genuine conflict. But those conflicts are productive, forcing both of them to defend their positions with logic and evidence rather than authority. Slowly, a new culture begins to take root within Blackthorn's court, one where dissent is not synonymous with disloyalty, where questions are encouraged rather than punished, where multiple voices contribute to governance rather than being drowned out by a single dominant will. It is messy, inefficient compared to Kyle's previous autocratic model, but it is also more resilient, more adaptable, more human. One evening, 6 weeks after the siege's end, Kyle stands on the eastern balcony watching the sun set over the valley. The snow has melted, revealing green shoots pushing up through thawed earth. Spring is coming, bringing with it the promise of renewal and growth. Behind him, the castle bustles with activity, the sounds of a domain actively rebuilding rather than merely surviving. Elra joins him, carrying 2 glasses of wine. She hands him one, and they stand in comfortable silence, watching the light fade. Finally, Elra speaks. Do you ever regret it? Choosing this path instead of maintaining absolute control? Kyle considers the question with the seriousness it deserves every day. But I also recognize that regret and rightness are not mutually exclusive. I can regret the difficulty of this approach while still believing it is better than the alternative. Elra nods slowly. The houses are still adjusting. Some resent the shared authority structure. They see it as diluting your power. Let them resent it. Kyle's voice is calm. Power diluted is power distributed, and distributed power is harder to topple than concentrated authority. Victor and Mira both proved that. They targeted me as a single point of failure. In the new structure, there is no single point of failure. If I fall, you continue. If you fall, I continue. The work persists beyond either of us. That is a terrifying level of trust. It is. But it is also the only sustainable model. Kyle turns to face her fully. You changed me, Elra, not by demanding it, not by manipulating me, but by simply refusing to accept that isolation was the same as strength. You saw through every wall I built and called me out on the lies I told myself, and I am better for it. Elra's eyes glisten with unshed tears. I did not come here seeking to change you. I came seeking survival. I know. And that is precisely why it worked. You were not performing strength or trying to prove anything. You were simply being yourself, honest, direct, unwilling to be diminished. And somehow, in refusing to be diminished by me, you showed me that I was diminishing myself. The words hang in the air between them, weighted with months of shared struggle and growth. Then Elra sets down her wine glass and steps closer, her hands coming up to frame Kael's face. I love you. The words are simple, devastating in their honesty. I did not plan to, did not want to, honestly, because it complicated everything, but I do. And I needed you to know that before anything else happens, before the next crisis or challenge. I needed you to know that what we have built together matters to me, not just politically, not just strategically, but personally. Kael feels something crack open in his chest, a wall he did not even realize he was still maintaining. He has told himself for months that what he and Elra share is partnership, is alliance, is strategic cooperation. But underneath all those rational justifications has been a truth he was too afraid to name. He loves her, completely, irrevocably, in ways that make him vulnerable in precisely the ways he spent years trying to avoid. And that vulnerability, rather than weakening him, has become the foundation of his greatest strength. I love you too. The admission feels like stepping off a cliff, terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. I have spent my entire life believing that love was a liability, that caring about anyone made you weak, but you have shown me that strength without love is just brutality, and I refuse to be brutal anymore. Elra's smile is radiant, and she pulls him into a kiss that tastes like wine and promise and hard-won hope. When they finally separate, both are breathing hard, foreheads pressed together in the gathering darkness. What happens now? Elra's voice is soft. Now we keep building, keep learning, keep growing. Kael's response is quiet but certain. We make mistakes. We face challenges. We navigate crises we cannot yet imagine, but we do it together. And that makes all the difference. They stand on the balcony as night falls completely, two figures silhouetted against the darkness, holding on to each other and the fragile, precious thing they have built together. Behind them, Blackthorn Keep stands solid and enduring, a fortress that has withstood siege and betrayal and emerged stronger for the testing. And ahead of them stretches an uncertain future filled with challenges and opportunities in equal measure. The noble houses will continue to test the new governance structure. Rivals will emerge seeking to exploit perceived weaknesses. Crises both internal and external will demand responses that balance justice with pragmatism, strength with compassion. But Kael is no longer facing those challenges alone. He has Elra beside him, her perspective complementing his, her strength reinforcing his own. He has advisors who feel empowered to speak honestly rather than simply echoing his views. He has a governance structure that distributes power rather than concentrating it, creating resilience through diversity rather than vulnerability through singularity. Most importantly, he has learned that leadership is not about being perfect. It is about being willing to evolve, to admit mistakes, to change course when evidence demands it, to embrace vulnerability not as weakness, but as the foundation of genuine strength. These are lessons Kael could never have learned in isolation. They required someone willing to challenge him, to see through his defenses, to refuse to accept that the walls he built were anything more than self-imposed prisons. Elra gave him that gift, the gift of her honesty, her courage, her unwillingness to be anything less than herself, even in the face of overwhelming power. And in return, Kael has given her something equally precious, a partnership built on genuine equality, where her voice matters not because he permits it, but because the structure of governance demands it. A position of authority that she earned through competence rather than favor, and a love that does not seek to possess or control, but simply to stand beside and support. Together, they have created something unprecedented in the Northern Dominion's history, a model of shared leadership that challenges centuries of autocratic tradition. It is imperfect, still finding its footing, vulnerable to all the pitfalls that plague human institutions. But it is also honest, adaptable, and fundamentally more humane than what came before. And that Kael has come to understand is what true power looks like. Not the capacity to dominate, not the ability to bend others to your will, but the courage to build something worth preserving, even when preservation requires sharing control with those you trust. The stars emerge one by one overhead, familiar constellations marking the turning of seasons. Kael watches them with Elra warm against his side, and for the first time in memory, he feels something he never thought possible. Peace. Not the peace of total control, but the peace of acceptance. Acceptance that he is human, fallible, capable of both great wisdom and terrible mistakes. Acceptance that leadership is not a solitary burden, but a shared responsibility. Acceptance that vulnerability chosen deliberately is infinitely stronger than armor maintained through fear. An acceptance that love, rather than weakening him, has given him something worth fighting for beyond mere power or position. The Dominion sleeps below them, its people resting behind walls that held when tested, trusting in leaders who proved worthy of that trust through choices made in the crucible of crisis. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new decisions, new opportunities to either uphold or betray the principles they have fought so hard to establish. But tomorrow is not yet here. Tonight, there is only this moment, this balcony, this woman beside him, and the quiet understanding that he has finally become the leader he was always capable of being. Not through domination, but through transformation. Not through isolation, but through connection. Not through fear, but through love. And as the night deepens and the castle settles into peaceful quiet, Duke Kael Viramont allows himself something he has not permitted in years. He allows himself to hope, not for control or certainty or any of the illusions that once defined his existence, but for something far more valuable and infinitely more difficult to achieve. A future built on trust. A legacy defined not by fear but by fairness, and a partnership that proves, against all odds and expectations, that power shared is power multiplied. That is the truth Victor never understood, that Mira learned too late, that Kael himself nearly missed in his relentless pursuit of control. True strength is not found in standing alone. It is found in choosing who to stand with, and having chosen, in refusing to let go even when the world demands it. Kael has made his choice, and whatever comes next, whatever trials or triumphs await in the unwritten chapters of his story, he will face them with Elra beside him, not as ruler and subject, not as master and subordinate, but as equals, as partners, as two people who looked into the abyss of their own limitations and chose to build a bridge across it together. That is the legacy Kael Viramont will leave to the Northern Dominion. Not walls or wealth or military conquests, but a philosophy. A way of leading that acknowledges the complexity of human nature and embraces it rather than trying to crush it into submission. It is a legacy still being written, still vulnerable to failure, still dependent on choices yet to be made. But it is also a legacy built on the strongest foundation Kael has ever known. The foundation of choice freely made, of trust deliberately given, and of love courageously embraced. And that, he has finally learned, is what makes power worth having. Not the capacity to control others, but the wisdom to empower them. Not the strength to stand alone, but the courage to stand together. Not dominance, but partnership. Not isolation, but connection. Not fear, but love. And in that realization, Duke Kael Viramont finds something he spent years believing was impossible. He finds peace, not the peace of total control, but the peace of knowing that whatever comes, he will not face it alone. And that makes all the difference.